Well, welcome everyone to April 3rd, 2025 to our study session here at our study session chambers, and appreciate everybody for being here. With that, we've got a long morning, I think, with our budget discussion and review of the council meeting on Monday. So with that, all of our council members are present. Thank you, everyone. And our first item one, is to review the agenda for Monday, April 7th meeting. And so if you have any questions on that, let's discuss now. And Mr. Brady, are there any presentations? I think maybe
Yes.
one on 5A?
Correct.
Okay. Council, if it's okay, could we have that presentation on 5A about the grid? Who gets to do that? Mr. McVeigh? Welcome, Stephen from the clerk's office. You're a new face here around the table. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Jeff McVeigh, Manager of Urban Transformation, and today with me, I think for our first time, is Stephanie Monge, Downtown Transformation Project Manager. We're happy to be here to be able to give you an overview of the MOU that you'll be thinking about or taking action on Monday. But to get started, Stephanie's going to go and give us a little bit of a background and kind of set the stage.
Good morning. So on December 7th, 2017, the city entered into a development agreement for a project commonly known as the Grid. It is located at 233 East Main Street, generally on the corner of Pomeroy Street and Main Street. It was approved as a mixed-use development. Unfortunately, on March 30th, 2024, the developer filed for bankruptcy. After the bankruptcy was filed, a trustee was appointed by the bankruptcy court to oversee the administration of the project. The trustee administered a process to select the best suited developer to purchase the project through bankruptcy, and the city coordinated with the trustee in selection of Soul Trust Maine QOZB LLC.
And we're happy to say that we have representatives of Soul Trust with us today. Dan Duffus and Gary Blakesley are in the audience.
Just, Stephanie, can we make it clear, maybe for all the council that doesn't know this, this was city-owned property?
Correct.
So this
Yes.
is happening, that's why we're here
Correct.
today. Otherwise, this wouldn't be our matter, but we are the property owners.
Correct.
Yes, this is city-owned property right next door to Benedictine University. The trustee reviewed the debts and claims to ensure the legitimacy of the claims. The trustee also investigated financial records to detect fraud or hidden assets. The trustee worked as the liaison between the bank and the city, and it worked with the city to select the new developer. The city will be executing an agreement negotiated by the trustee to settle claims against the bankruptcy estate. The city's roles and efforts in the project continuity. The city had the developer put aside $1.7 million in case he did not complete the project. With that $1.7 million, the city was able to restore right-of-way and complete public improvements. We worked with the trustee to choose a new developer, and we defended the subcontractor and contractor claims that were made against the city.
For the council members that weren't around at the time, I think it was towards the Fifth Amendment to the development agreement, we started questioning whether or not the grid was going to be completed. So the council required that they escrow $1.7 million so that we could restore the site should the project ever fail. Unfortunately, the project did fail, and we were able to access that $1.7 million, and we completed quite a bit of right-of-way work so that we could open up Main Street, we could open up Pomeroy back up, we got streetlights in and landscaping, so it was a very good, very good protection that the city had, and it's been a benefit going forward as part of our negotiations as well.
Jeff, what was the cost of that? Right-of-way and improvements out of the 1.7?
I believe we have expended all $1.7 million.
Okay.
So, where are we now? To give you kind of introduce Soul Trust and who they are, They are a real estate investment group. They operate in both Washington and Arizona. And right now in Arizona, they have 12 projects in the works, totaling almost $500 million. In Mesa, you'll know that Soul Trust, they are the developers of what was formerly known as Courtyard Towers, which is now Forge Tower with that beautiful mural. They are at the lease-up stage, so they should be moving people in soon. Soul Trust, in addition to negotiating an agreement with the city, they also have to work with the trustee to settle all of the contractor and subcontractor claims as part of their purchase of the property out of bankruptcy. So give you an idea of what's different between our existing development agreement with the Grid at Mesa LLC and what would happen, the MOU with Soul Trust. And with the original agreement, that was a lease, a long-term lease with a purchase option later in the lease. In this instance, we will enter into a lease with the developer during the construction phase, but they will have the option to purchase the property as they complete, get C of Os on each of the phases. The appraised value, they would be purchasing the property at the appraised value of $2.985 million. One large change is that the developer and the city both agree that we do not want to see construction on top of the Pomeroy parking garage. The structural risk and the amount of structural work that would need to be taken to have garages, four levels of apartments above those garages. That garage was more risk than we wanted to take on or that the developer wanted to take on. The previously approved courtyard apartments are going to be replaced with townhomes. The reason the developer has requested this change is there is an interest. It's not a commitment yet, but there is an interest to see whether or not a for sale product would be a possibility here. We will again lease the land during construction. The city no longer will require that the developer complete improvements to the Gateway Park. That's that little pocket park at the corner of Mesa Drive and Main Street. And any of our agreements, no matter the action of the council, still will require the approval of the bankruptcy court. Phase one will continue to include 76 micro units above 9,000 square feet of commercial space and 10,000 square feet of office space on the second floor. The second phase would include 12 townhomes and associated public improvements. Third phase would be an additional 13 townhomes, and these would be the ones that would wrap the north and east side of the Pomeroy garage. Upon certificate of occupancy for each of the phase, the developer will have the option to purchase the property within 180 days. We have not yet determined what the purchase price of each phase will be, but we know that the overall purchase price will be that $2.985 million. That we do have the option for the developer, if they wanted to move forward with all of the townhomes at once, that they could take and purchase phase two and phase three simultaneously. The city will also enter into a 50-year parking license agreement with the developer within the Pomeroy garage for the required parking spaces. It's important to note that the developer has requested that the city provide a parking rate of $10 per month for the first 10 years, after which it would then be whatever the adopted standard parking rate would be. That is fairly consistent with the agreement that we had with the Grid originally. The city will also cooperate as the landowner. We will have to cooperate in subdividing the property into three separate phases, and should there be townhomes, into townhome parcels as well. Again, we will not solicit any offers during the term of this MOU, and we will continue to offer our concierge services as it relates to zoning and permit approval. Quick overview. I know it's a quick overview, but we're happy to take any questions.
Council, any questions? Ms. Pillsbury.
Is there a site plan for this or a map that shows what all area we're talking about? I guess I'm confused on, is it just this building or what parts of that property it is?
Councilmember Pillsbury, unfortunately, we do not have one here. We will make sure to send one over to you that will show the three different phases.
Okay, that'd be great. I'm just not exactly sure. I drive by there every single morning, but I'm just not sure what all it includes.
I don't know if I'll be able to visually direct. So it's the land that has the building on it today, the dirt lot behind that building, and then there's a narrow strip of land on the north side of the Pomeroy garage that goes all the way to where Pomeroy makes that turn south, and then there'd be a strip of land along the front of the east side of the garage. as well.
Okay, so it's none of that dirt lot or the Wells Fargo building, or, because you said
No.
the corner park, so it's none of that.
No, in the original agreement with the grid, they were required to complete a certain amount of public improvements in order to get the lease incentives that what the agreement included. That was included significant improvements to Gateway Park, which no longer, we no longer want to see or support, nor does the project warrant, given the scale change.
Okay.
Ms. Goforth.
So what's the total acreage?
Do we, total acreage? Yeah, it's just about 3 acres total.
Okay. And so they have the option to purchase in phases after they complete. So the first one is the existing building?
Yes,
Is that
correct.
And then the rest of the land, the parcels are behind that, right?
Correct.
So if they choose not to do that, then what do we think is going to happen with that? Because how, in demand is the rest of the land behind a large apartment complex?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, I feel confident, first, my first answer will be I feel confident that they will move on to phase 2, simply because that's where the amenity space is for phase 1, as well as commitments to a first floor restaurant user to have space within that, a patio space as well, and the built-in customers. Having said that, the city will not sell the land for any phase until they actually complete the phase. So there is the protection that we do have the land, or that we would not give up the land should they not move forward. Would there be demand to build something there? I do believe in the future that we would be able to market that land for additional development to other developers in the future as well.
What makes you confident that they're going to complete all phases?
They have Soul Trust has a proven track record, and we have been able to work with them closely. We have seen the financials, their pro formas, and their financial capacity to believe that they are able to move it forward. I will also say that even without this MOU in place or final agreements, Soul Trust has already been spending a fair amount of money on architecture, design, and engineering for phase 1 and phase 2.
And Jeff, would you say that this was the outcome of both the city staff and the trustee from the bankruptcy court making this decision on this?
Correct, yes. The trustee, I think it'd be fair to say the trustee did a little bit more financial vetting than we did, because that's their role, and that they have to stand behind this when they take it to the bankruptcy court, because in the end, the trustee is the one representing the grid and the entire bankruptcy state.
Did we have any reservations of the prior developer of the grid? I mean, when we
Yes.
entered into that agreement,
Yes.
since I wasn't
Yes.
here.
They did not have the same experience that you have with this developer.
Yes.
Hence the 1%.
Mr. Adams.
There we go. Thank you. Just a few questions. Was Soul Trust the sole bidder? Were there others? Was there a process that you eliminated others? And what process did you go through?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, the trustee administered the process. They had, I believe, 11 qualified interested developers. Once all of those developers reviewed all the materials associated with the agreements, I believe it was 4 developers provided, I would say, legitimate offers. I believe all 4 of the developers could have completed the project. But in the end, the offer and the resolution, particularly the resolution with the contractor and the subcontractor that Soul Trust provided, did make them the #1 candidate from both the trustees' perspective and the city's perspective.
Okay, thank you. My other question would be, and it may be a difficult one to answer, but I remember this project from its inception. I was there at the groundbreaking, so I remember that. Do we have any idea, if we go back to the inception, 2017, and if this all plays out as we hope it will, are we made whole, or have we still lost money as a city?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer that question fully.
I understand.
The city will be made whole in that we will get the full fair market appraised value of the land. Now that does come with a caveat that as part of this agreement, the city is waiving any of the claims that we had against the previous developer and the bankruptcy estate, which totals approximately $800,000. And it is our intent that we will use the proceeds from the sale of the land to make our utilities whole.
Are any of the other secured or unsecured creditors in the bankruptcy waiving their claims in a similar fashion?
I am not aware of any of the other contractors or subcontractors waiving their claims.
So that was part of the negotiated deal, so.
Correct.
Because it would seem to me, all the liens will have long been extinguished unless they were foreclosed, and that wouldn't have done any good anyway. So those were all then unsecured claims in the bankruptcy, I assume, or no?
No, Mayor, Councilmember Adams, there was a fair amount of secured claims against the bankruptcy estate. There was a handful of unsecured claims. There was also a handful of unsecured claims that were made directly against the city that the city attorney's office was successful in getting most of those removed, but there is still one hanging out there that thinks that they have some reason to be able to hold a lien against the city that will also have to be resolved in order for this project to be able to move, or for this deal to be able to move forward.
Without going into detail, how much is it?
Almost $6 million.
Not an insignificant amount.
No, it's not, but that has been negotiated, as I understand, that has been negotiated to a significantly smaller amount up to this point.
Will the city be paying that?
No, that will be out of the settlement and
Part of the deal? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Anything else, council?
I have a couple of questions, or did you want to? You're about to go? Okay. Okay, I'm trying to keep up. So the city is the landholder at this point,
Yes,
and the city is going to lease the land during construction?
correct.
And then the sale will be after construction? I'm trying to,
So as each mayor, Councilmember Duff, as each phase completes and they receive their certificate of occupancy, they will have the option to purchase the land for that phase.
okay.
So that could be a three-phase purchase, or it could be a two-phase purchase if they decide to purchase phase 2 and 3 together.
If the intention is to sell the land,
Correct.
okay,
But
not
not after,
continue the lease.
not until the project has been, that phase of the project is complete and they have a certificate of occupancy.
The 3 million, is that today's market value?
That appraisal was just 2 months ago, not less than 2
Okay,
months ago.
all right, so it's not
Effective December
from
16th.
2017 or
Correct.
whatever. Okay, and is there an accompanying development agreement?
There will be a development agreement and a lease and a license agreement that we will bring back to council. This MOU is what is necessary for the trustee to be able to take our MOU as well as the MOU with the contractors and the subcontractors settlements to the bankruptcy court to get approval of the bankruptcy court. Once we have approval of the bankruptcy court of these terms, then we will be able to negotiate the final development agreement and lease agreement, bring that back to council.
Okay, so it's kind of complex.
Yes.
So subdividing the property is the 3 phases?
Correct.
That won't require any rezoning?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to check with that. Were any of the leases retained? There was some pre-committed leases on the property with the grid. I don't know if those were salvaged at all.
The developer is working very closely and negotiating with Crust Italian Eatery. That was the first floor tenant that was part of the grid. Crust has a strong desire to remain in this project, and we remain very hopeful that they are going to be able to reach an agreement so that Crust will be part of this project.
Good, I hope so. And the townhomes are for sale? This is a minor question, I'm just curious.
There is an interest in making them for sale. There could be some logistical issues with lot layouts and how you can make that work. We are making sure that we leave that opportunity open so that we can make. I think it would be fair to say that if it is something that's viable, the developer would prefer to do for sale project.
Great, okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may, just one clarification on something that Jeff said. The structure of the deal is, the primary is a lease with options to purchase with real estate purchase agreements. We might use a development agreement in addition to that, or we might use restrictive covenants. And so on uses that we don't want to see used there. So a development agreement or restrictive covenant. So we haven't decided which way to go on that. So a development agreement's sort of a maybe. We'll figure that out as we finish up the documents.
Okay, great. Just some final questions for me. You talked about the public improvements at the park there. Why was that not continued? Tell us the scope of the park projects improvements over there. I forget what they were going to be, and so they're no longer going to be.
Oh, well, Mayor, we never actually got to see the scope of the park improvement projects because the previous developer never got far enough along to actually prepare improvement plans for the parks that we could take forward and get approval of. But the intent was to have a pretty significant direct connection diagonally from the corner of that parking garage where there was a very strong element, like a signature element for the building. And it's going to be a direct walkway to the light rail path. With the development that we are talking about today, that connection isn't as necessary. The other aspect, Mayor, is that the developer was obligated to complete $3.5 million worth of public improvements in order to receive, I believe it's $2.5 or $3 million in rent credits over the course of 20 years. Since we are not doing a similar arrangement where there is an incentive-based lease, the public improvements, it was harder for us to be able to justify requiring the public improvements on top of the project, as it would have been very difficult for the project to absorb those costs as well as finish the project and make it viable financially.
Okay, got it. My other question is about the parking structure, parking garage. Talk about a 50-year parking lease. Is that normal, what we do? And then the $10 component, and is there any public parking in the parking garage?
Mayor, that parking garage has, I believe, about 850 parking spaces. And if you go there today, I think you might find 10 to 20 cars. If you remember when we were first doing the grid development agreement, I did the math, and we were generating about $8,000 or $9,000 a year in parking revenue from that garage. So there is not going to be a lack of public parking still available with this project. The one parking agreement that we do have there it serves the old Wells Fargo building. It's been in place since the 80s. And I believe they currently pay just under $9 a month for their spaces through that agreement. It is not uncommon for us to use our parking as an incentive. A 10-year term at $10 may be a little longer of a term than we normally would have, but given the nature of the project, we felt it reasonable, and given where we were with our previous agreements, we also thought is a reasonable request.
For a 50-year lease agreement?
Oh, 50 years is a common term for parking. It matches any term that they would have for the useful life of the building.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I had. Council, anything else?
Mayor, just quickly
Yes.
before we conclude
Let's wrap
here,
this up.
maybe just as on my way out, just to say something.
Yeah.
I would suggest in the future that the council do not do deals with a single developer without an RFP process. I think we fell into a trap with a developer who came to us with an idea that we all fell in love with, but there was no evaluation against anybody else or any other financing of a developer. And we came to find out pretty quickly that developer was pretty shallow in their financial capacities and relied upon the construction company to finance this, and that has become very problematic for us. So I think in the future, we just have to, the competition is good, getting proposals, and frankly, this going through this trustee process has made it a very competitive process with the trustee involved in pushing the process through with the developers and making sure they're putting forth their best proposal. And so I think we feel like we've actually benefited from that to get to a solid ground where it's not just the city's recommendation, but we've got kind of, if you would, an independent third party who's also been evaluating this. So we're encouraged because this is a developer that's proven itself in downtown Mesa. So would think that they would know the market. And the good news is this building is, I don't know, how far along would you say relative to completion? It's
60%.
60%. So we got a good head start and we'll like to get it done. It's a very prominent location, so we're excited to get it completed.
And if it, just to add to that, I mean, the Soul Trust has already started, again, as I mentioned, they've already started doing design work and looking at the previous plans, and, you know, just in reviewing and doing, you know, reasonable value engineering, they've already found just in one area, in mechanicals and HVAC, they already found nearly $600,000 in construction savings just by putting a little sharper pencil to the plans.
Well, I look at, there's, additional phases too, as this project moves forward. So I think we look forward to getting the grid done, get the building occupied, and then we'll see what the future of that brings. But with that, we look forward to the construction, getting that done and getting the grid going. Tell us about the commercial and retail space on the first floor. Don't we have that in play too?
Again, Mayor, we are very hopeful that Soul Trust is going to successfully complete the negotiations that they are working on for Crust Italian Eatery, which would be the majority of the first floor. They also have intentions of having their leasing office on the first floor. The second floor was an office space that was being purposely built out for Neurogenics, which if we can muddy the waters anymore, it just happened to be tied up in the same investor as the grid at Mesa and the contractor. So that office space was so specifically built out for a medical office user that that might take a little bit longer for them to find a good user to be able to take that space.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. We'll move on with the agenda. Council, any more thoughts on the agenda on Monday? Ms. Spilsbury?
Well, I just wanted to look at 6A again.
Okay.
If we can, I have a few questions.
Thank you, Evan and Mary. 6A.
Good morning, Mayor, council member. Good morning, Mayor, council members. As you all remember, back in February, the Lofts was on the agenda to be introduced to City Council for a project that included multifamily housing. Based on the meeting that we had with council, we heard a few things and had gone back and we worked with the developer to try to address some of the concerns that we heard from the council, that they related to the massing of the buildings, the density of the project, and then the overall design of the buildings. And so we've worked really closely with the applicant to break up the massing. They've reduced the number of units by 2, and they've also simplified some of the architecture for the building. So Evan's got a presentation that we can go through and we can show you the changes since it was first on the calendar to be introduced back in February.
Sure, please do.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm here this morning to talk to you about ZON 24638, which is the Lofts at 121. Their specific request is a rezone from RS6 to RM4 with a planned area development overlay. They're also asking for site plan review to allow for a 66-unit multiple residence development. The subject property is crosshatched on the map in front of you. We're located north of Main Street, east of Alma School Road, and we are just north of Beverly Park. When this was reviewed against the 2040 Mesa General Plan based on when the application was submitted, the general plan character area at the time was neighborhood with a transit corridor station area overlay. Those are predominantly single residence, but they can contain variety of housing types. And specifically, the station area character type is intended to have a more intense development than the associated corridor, as it is directly adjacent to a light rail stop. As I mentioned, the current zoning is RS6. They are requesting RM4 with a PAD. There is some development existing on the site. There's a number of structures that would be demolished for this project. As Mary mentioned, the applicant did make some changes to the site plan. I'll get into those specifics in just a second, but this is the site plan that council would be considering, and it's for 66 units. It has access from Beverly. There's a primary entrance on the south side of the development. The northern access point is emergency and solid waste. There are a number of deviations associated with this request. They're outlined in your staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions on those, but they relate to the maximum number of garage doors in a row, lot coverage, landscape and building setbacks, setbacks across drive aisles, and some landscaping deviations. Building separation is in bold because that's a new deviation. I'll go through that in just a second. As justification for the requested deviations, the applicant is providing over 8,000 square feet of additional private open space than would be required by the code, and they are providing unique building architecture. So getting into those specific modifications that Mary mentioned was that when this was on the council agenda on February 24th, there were 68 units. We did hear from council some concerns about building massing, creating breaks in the building and the overall density. Here is that February 24th site plan. You can see that the buildings, primarily those center units of buildings, are 15 in a row. So they were very large buildings. There were 3 of those. The buildings on the east side of the site were a little bit smaller, but still contiguous buildings. The site plan that council will be considering is currently 66 units, so the applicant removed 2 units to reduce the density. They used the space that they saved from removing those 2 units to create some physical breaks in the building. Starting on the west side of the site, that break between those buildings is 15 feet in width. And the east side buildings were also split. Those are 10 feet in width, 11 feet in width there. So they had created physical breaks to work on the building massing and make it more visually open. Here you can see the building elevations that were as part of the February 24th council packet. Here you can see the current building elevations that reflect the break in the buildings. There has been extensive citizen participation as part of this request. The applicant notified property owners within 1,000 feet, as well as HOAs and registered neighborhoods, held a neighborhood meeting. They had 12 neighbors that participated. Staff has received numerous emails from residents in the area. We've updated the citizen participation report that's part of your submittal documents to reflect those correspondences. We had 3 citizens speak at the Planning and Zoning Board hearings, and we had some more at the call to the public a few council meetings ago. Their primary concerns were with density, traffic, safety, and some environmental impacts. Staff does find that this complies with the Mesa 2040 general plan, as well as Chapter 69 of the zoning ordinance for site plan review, and Chapter 22 for a planned area development overlay. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. The Planning and Zoning Board also recommended approval with conditions by a vote of 5-0. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions council might have.
Council, any questions?
Hi, thank you. Happy to see that we have made a few changes. I know that one of our concerns when we talked about it in February was that there wasn't like an active neighborhood. I think we've seen that was probably not true. Now we have an active neighborhood. So I'm just wondering, how have the citizens that have sent emails and come to speak and express their concerns, how have those specific concerns been dealt with?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury. So the applicant has made some changes that I outlined to the site plan, primarily reducing the density by 2 units and creating more breaks between the buildings. I think the neighbors' overall concerns, and I'm sure they'll be here when this goes to council to express those, is really the multifamily nature of the project. So it's the overall density, and there's still some traffic concerns the neighbors have on Beverly. I think those might be bigger picture issues than what the applicant is proposing currently.
So, but the traffic studies have been done and presented to the neighborhood to show the impact the traffic will have or the capacity on the road?
Correct. The applicant did a traffic study as part of the review of any project. They get routed to our transportation department for review as well. So transportation has reviewed this request.
And it says on here, safety and environmental impacts. So what specifically were their concerns with safety and environmental impacts?
The neighbors' concerns related to safety were primarily pedestrian related, kids walking to school. The environmental impacts had to do with the air quality of that number of units on a smallish size parcel and car exhaust and similar.
Okay. I know there's like a difference of opinion on the park, whether this makes the park safer or whether it makes it more, more people, make it less safe for kids playing at the park or whatever. Have we looked at that? What are our thoughts on the parks, the effect to the park?
That's a great question, Councilmember Spilsbury. So the way the park is currently, it's probably an underutilized park, and it might be an opportunity for some behaviors that we would not want to see at the park. I think having additional units that face out onto the park is probably a good thing overall to get more eyes on the park, but also to have more people that can utilize the park. I think once we have more people utilizing the park, some of the folks who may be using it not as intended might find it not as desirable to do those things at the park.
Okay, and I know there's a lot of foot traffic to school and stuff like that, so, I mean, they've looked at all of those safety concerns, and what if they found anything to be concerned there?
There's accessible routes. There's sidewalks provided. There's internal pedestrian connections. Yes, there's traffic on Beverly now, and it would increase, but there are still safe routes for
Okay.
pedestrians.
And I don't know if, I don't know how this is decided, but my understanding is these are for sale units.
The way that it stands right now, they would be for rent units. If the applicant wanted to make these for sale, they would need to come back and go through the subdivision process, which would change the request slightly as far as the deviations go. It's something that they could look at in the future. Right now, a subdivision plat is not part of this request.
Okay, I guess I misheard that or something. Is there a chance for the applicant to speak or at our meeting on Monday night?
That's up to the mayor, per se.
Okay. It's up to the mayor. So I just asked
What's
if it's possible for the applicant to speak either here or Monday night so that.
Oh, yeah.
Since
Be able
they
to
haven't been able to voice
Right,
their.
Monday will be fine.
Monday, okay. So I would like to hear from the applicant as well.
I'm sure we'll get a text or something from the applicant stating if it's a for sale or rent product.
Okay. Yeah, I've had a few
The
conversations.
applicant is here if you'd like to ask now.
We'll wait. We'll have discussion first.
Okay, and then I had another question. Oh, I know there's another project on Beverly that is in the works, and it's kind of muddied this a little bit as far as maybe some confusion on what type of project this is, and the other one. Does that come into play when we're looking at projects, what might or might not be also coming around there? When we're looking at traffic and, stuff like that?
Absolutely. So, well, first, each project is reviewed kind of on its own merits, but contextually, those are things that we look at. This is a market rate apartment complex currently, but as these come in, traffic patterns change. As you add more units, there would be more traffic. So as we are reviewing these, yes, we are very cognizant of other projects.
Do you know how many units that other proposed one is? I don't know what stage of the process it's in, so I don't know. I just am aware of it, but.
I don't know off the top of my head, Councilmember Spilsbury. It is smaller. It's fewer units than this project. I don't remember the specific unit count off the top of my head.
So in specific, in regards to like the traffic study, you've looked at like the total number of units that would be impacted on the road would be impacted by?
These two projects are at kind of at different stages.
Right.
This one is nearing the end. It's up for council consideration. The other project is still going through review cycle. So those are things that we're looking at as we're reviewing the other project.
40 units?
40
Okay.
units, yes.
I heard you whisper. No, just because looking at the impact on the neighborhood and their concerns they have, I just want to make sure we're looking at all of the different things that go into this. Okay, that was a lot of questions. I'll stop for now.
Oh, that's great. Any others?
The other thing is 36 units?
I think it's 40.
Did they increase
I think
it?
they might have.
Okay.
They might have decreased
Maybe they
it.
increased it since.
We've worked with them on the density,
Sorry.
and I believe they've decreased the number of units slightly. I believe
Okay, this
36 is correct.
Per the public meeting on February. So maybe that has changed. But it's, okay, within 36 to 40 units, I guess, to give you a consideration. The traffic study has been done, and the 36 units doesn't really have any big impact. I would like to add also that a little bit more traffic doesn't hurt in an area where they complain about speeding, which they do, because the more traffic actually is safer because people move slower because there's more things to watch. There's not wide open with nothing going on. So I'm not too worried about that, especially this is a TOD, a transit-oriented development, and it's within just a few minutes, probably 5 minutes, maybe less, to the transit station, and we know that that may be an option for these units, as well as we look at the future in which cars we will be less dependent on. But on transit-oriented developments, the intent is to lean into transit options, so the car impacts are I don't think as complicated as when you're away from transit. On this, the safety in the park was actually fairly bad through 2022. There's 225 incidents. I don't know if we have anybody from PD, so I'll just go from this report. And there was a lot of focus put on the park and what we could do in order to reduce the transients, drug use, things like that going on in the park. Parks and Recreation got involved, installed some park equipment, did the fun and fitness. There was a gate that opened to some apartments that are on the east side, and the children started participating, doing soccer games, and the park started becoming active. And in 23, there was 90 incidents. Last year, 76. So far this year, as of early March, there's 5. So the more activities in the park, more children, more families, it has become safer. And the police department has been more proactive. A lot of these incidents have been directed in the park of the police being proactive. So things are getting better there. I've also talked to Parks and Recreation as well as the Sustainability Department for making some additional enhancements, perhaps adding some trees, adding some benches that were taken away when we had a lot of problems, fixing the slides, fixing the climbing wall, looking at maybe some solar lighting, things like that to be able to enhance the park a little bit more, especially when we expect more activity by having additional development there. So I think it's going to these developments will bring a richer neighborhood that has more activity. We have some applicants that have been, not applicants, some residents that have been difficult to engage with. They're very engaged. They show up at every meeting and speak. But to have a dialogue has been difficult because the opinion is absolutely not, no way, don't want to talk anything about design, anything, a tree, it doesn't matter. We don't want to talk about it. The answer is it's not here. So finding the compromise has been through our own way of approaching it, knowing the density was an issue, looking at all these issues individually and trying to make it the best environment possible. From Main Street up to these developments is kind of a depressed area. Nothing, these are, some old homes with some beautiful trees, but prior to that, there is some very small homes. I'm going to assume maybe a lot of them are rentals and stuff. It just needs, there's no vibrancy really south of this park, from the park south to Main Street. I'm hoping with these developments and increasing the density, which is the intent of a transit-oriented development, that we're able to achieve some businesses on Main Street that will enhance the neighborhood and complement the neighborhood, and we can have this part of Main Street is not vibrant. It needs a lot of work. And by increasing some density, I'm hoping that we can some neighborhood enhancements there. Now, up until Second Street is the one where we have the older homes, more mature landscaping, larger ranch homes. It feels very neighborhoody and such like that. This is south. This is on the back fence of those homes and south. And it might sound like it's too much, but myself, living on 2nd Street in the downtown area, I am 2 blocks from Main Street. I have apartments over my fence. I have 3-story, 2 developments down. I have a police station almost catty-corner. I am not afraid of the development. In fact, when I moved to downtown in 2009, the environment was more intimidating than it is today. And it is because of the development and the activity and people engaged. So it's not necessarily bringing development is bad. In fact, in downtown, it's helped downtown. Downtown was not a place that you would, 10, 15 years ago, walk down Main Street confidently. You would find your routes that you felt safe. Today, I think it's much different. And I realize I'm not on Main Street, but the neighborhoods, because I am one who walks, back and forth. So, and I live in a gorgeous neighborhood with gorgeous houses around me. It hasn't, encroached on the standard of living. In fact, it has enhanced it because of the nicer. So I think we have to look, we always think density is bad, but sometimes density brings more life to an area that is depressed. Now, let's see if I had anything else. I know we're worried about the children walking to and from school, slower traffic. Hopefully some cars parked along the street here and there will slow things down. It'll be safer. More people walking on the sidewalks, again, makes it safer. And then the other comment I had is that when we looked at this in February, the applicant was upset, I shouldn't say upset, was wishing to have expressed or participated in the dialogue that we shared before we made a decision. And I realized that opportunity is Monday, but I must say as a council member, sometimes we're expecting a lot of people to show up for this. When you have to think very quickly on your feet about the pros and cons and you're making a decision within minutes, it's really hard. So I would like to ask the applicant, if the mayor approves, if there's a couple of comments he wants to make this time before Monday, because I think it's helpful to have things settle in our heads, think about questions we have before a public meeting, which will have a mass of people showing up regarding this, and the direction of the meeting is addressing with the residents their questions, which it should be, and that's what we do. But our questions are crammed in there, and now we're trying to sort it out in a very short amount of time and taking a vote. Since we haven't heard from the applicant, I would encourage some way just to be able to hear a couple of things ahead of time. That's just where I'm at with this being stretched out, is at some point, I think we need to hear from the applicant in the last minutes. It's difficult, so I'll leave it at that and ask.
Thank you, council. Before I entertain that, council, any more questions? Mr. Redia?
Yeah, just to talk on density, I think this merits some of the density there. If folks are familiar with Almasco, Maine, this has been a corner that, since I've been on council and prior council members and prior to the light rail, prior to decades of issues on Almasco and Maine. And I think the quality development that we need, that I think our planning staff has worked with the applicant, we need this quality development that adds density, that adds more people to ensure that we can bring up that corner. I think that's part of the I think plans for us on Main Street to ensure that we get the quality dense development on Main Street because of the asset that we have of light rail there. to add more people to utilize that asset. I think this merits the consideration of having this type of density being so close to light rail, right? And so that I agree with Councilmember Duff on it being on so close to the line. I think this makes sense. And one thing I wasn't familiar, because when I looked at the renderings, why did it have like these slanted roofs? I think some of the, and I think the applicant can talk about, some of the homes actually had slanted roof on it, so if I'm not mistaken. So that was interesting. You know, I know that the discussion was around the character and the feel, but actually seeing some of the older homes that had this slanted roof, I think adds like a modern twist to what that character was in that neighborhood, right? Or some of those homes that had that slanted roof. So just a particular thing that I realized from having a conversation with the applicant. So I think those are my comments. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Thank you. A number of thoughts about this proposal. I spent some time in that neighborhood a couple 3 weeks ago on my bike, including the park, and got off my bike and walked around and tried to envision what this would look like if it were to come to pass. You see a lot more when you're on foot and on a bike than you do in a car, and I do that quite often. There are a number of, this is one of those very difficult infill questions for me, and there are a number of things that I've been weighing about this project. I appreciate that the applicant has reduced density. I don't think 2 is much. It's almost nothing, in my opinion. It's okay, you wanted a reduction in density, we'll give you 2. That's not a reduction in my view, so that hasn't been achieved. Where I've heard, and Evan, thank you for clarifying, this is a rental community as presented.
That is correct.
I've heard the argument or the statement made that it was for purchase. And I was starting to warm up to that, because I think when you buy something and you're committed, you're invested in the neighborhood. When you rent, maybe so, maybe not. This is not a comment against renters. I was a renter when I was young. So were all of my kids. But when you buy, now I'm invested in the neighborhood. So that, had it been that this was going to be for ownership community, I was starting to move towards the center. Now that this has been clarified, that troubles me. I see the argument about transit-oriented development. It's a short walk to the light rail station. That's a check in the positive side of the column. I have up here on my screen, I asked and received the comparative densities for surrounding projects. For example, Beverly Point and Eden Village, I think those would be the closest ones that access off of Beverly. Those are in the, one is 13.4, one is 13 dwelling units per acre, and our request here is for 22. So my overall feeling is this is really tight. I don't see I don't see a lot of open space. It just tight. How much can we put on this space? And that's as much as we can get. And I understand, I'm not unsympathetic to the fact that when you build something, the numbers have to play out, cost versus income. I get that. And maybe this is what this project requires to make it pencil. Not an easy decision, not an easy thing to evaluate. And I have tried to look at it from as many different sides as I can. Good arguments are made on both sides of this issue. However, I still feel the density is way over the top. I'm not going to comment about the architectural style because it's in the eye of the beholder. Creative design, creative architecture, great. Looks great in one spot, maybe it doesn't look so great in another, but that's up to the individual. So my taste doesn't have to be somebody else's. As it stands, I'm not supportive of the project. Wish I could be, but that's where I'm at, my comments. Thank you.
Mayor, I just think it's really important that if we're going to have this kind of a conversation where we're expressing support or disapproval, we need to hear from the applicant, because he's got some stuff to say about for sale versus rental and open space, and, some of the concerns that Rich has, he can directly,
Yeah, I wanted to
speak
hear
to
from
that.
council first.
Okay.
And then we will invite the applicant up at this time. Applicant, are you here? Of course, Mr. Boyle.
Should I wait for Rich to come back since he's the...
Yeah. Mayor, while he's, while we're waiting to come back, we've.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. We've discussed this as a transit-oriented development, which typically involves parking reductions, and I don't see that here. On page 8, about the parking table. Is this accurate?
I'm sorry, Mayor, Vice Mayor Summers, I missed the first part of your question.
Yeah, no problem. So parking spaces required?
Right.
They're meeting or exceeding the parking spaces?
They are.
They're not asking for a waiver for reduction of parking spaces?
That is correct.
Okay, I just want.
Exceeding.
They're exceeding the number. Typically, when we talk about TOD, it's a reduction request for parking spaces, and that's not happening.
That is correct.
So also though, this is my big beef with all of this, is their garages. So
Correct.
it skews the numbers. So that's why, anyways, we can get into all of that. But I think you have to look at it when they're private parking or whatever we call it, when two spaces or one, are they one-car garages or two-car garages? Two. So if they're two-car garages, each unit could only use those two, right?
You're not
So-
parking in a driveway,
Yes,
is what you're talking
yes.
about.
So
and I
that's
think they
why
can-
I think the numbers, I'm fine without a traffic or a parking reduction because of that particular type of parking situation.
So we'll hear about that in the parking situation. Thank you.
Mr. Boyle, time's yours.
Thank you. Is this on?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Thank you for letting me speak. If I may just briefly start with the previous conversation you guys were having about the one on Main Street. I've got some concerns about the cul-de-sac project, which also I don't believe the developers quite have the depth, and that seemed to be a big issue with that one. So I would just invite you to check that project out. Okay, now on to this one.
Okay, we can't have that conversation.
That's not on the agenda.
Sorry, okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Strike that from the record. On to this one. When the owner, Mr. Rowley, first came to me, he said, I want to do a for sale project. And I said, okay, in the past, typically that's something that we take care of after the thing. You get the thing through the process and then you do your subdivision after. And that's just the way that we've always done it when we've worked with planning directors in the past. As we got to this point, Marion Evan asked that we do it sooner, and so we've engaged a civil engineer to get that process started. The intent is that these would be for sale. And that just comes from my view. I live about a third of a mile from this project, and since I've moved back, I've been very interested in generational neighborhoods. When my grandfather grew up down the street from us, when he got older, there was no place for him to retire to downsize, and so we had to move several miles away, just south of your cornfield, or the cornfield that you farm. And then his neighborhood was gone. His neighbors that knew him, the people who'd lived next to him for 40 years were gone, and suddenly he was in a totally different place. And I heard a presentation, I believe Councilmember Duff was at it as well, about generational neighborhoods. And I said, well, this is what we need. We need places in our neighborhood so you can stay in your neighborhood near your neighbors. You can stay near your people you go to church with, the people you're on city council or on the school board with, everything like that, so that we have a place to go. And then the other challenge that we have currently is it's very hard for the rising generation to buy anything. Everything is very, very expensive. If you have kids or grandkids in the 20s, it's very, very hard to do that. And so every time I develop something, I design it so that it can be for sale. The subdivision part of it is always a tricky element, and we're working with that. And they don't always make them for sale, but I always design them with that in mind so that they could be a for sale unit.
Mayor, if I could Tim, if I could clarify that just a second. As this project is presented, it is not for sale. To do a subdivision plat is going to require a number of new deviations. It would need to come back to council for that. Not to say that the applicant couldn't do that in the future, but as it's being presented to council currently, this is a multifamily development. Rezoning would be required for a plat because there's going to be new deviations. There's going to be some site changes that would occur as part of that. Again, not that they couldn't do it in the future, but as this is currently presented, it would be for rent.
So we can't say as staff, we would not publicly be able to say, this is a for sale product. We have to say it is for rent. So.
Can I interrupt, Mayor? So why the discrepancy here? Like, if you say you're designing it for sale, that seems counter to the actual code.
So we've done a number of these, and the requirements to make it for sale have shifted over time, and there's a hinge point on it, which is underground retention, and we've been working with. We've got several projects going through that we're adjusting for, because this is when you get way down in the code. There's this little thing that lets the city engineer decide whether the underground retention can allow a project to be for sale or not. There's this little kind of detail that Reese Anderson finally found that's keeping a lot of projects that could be for sale from being for sale. And this is something I've been trying to resolve for 6 or 7 years, working with this. And so we designed this so that should the underground retention issue be resolved, I don't believe there has to be any changes to make it for sale product. It just has to be subdivided, because I think the underground retention is usually the sticking point. Am I wrong?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, there's a number of things that would change with the request. Underground retention is one. The way utilities work, because utilities can't cross property lines, is another one. But the big one is when we're reviewing this as 66 units on one lot. If you subdivide that, now you have 66 attached single-family residences. And that changes setbacks, it changes most all of the requests that would be made, because we're looking at 66 individual lots as opposed to one lot. There's requirements for utilities not crossing property lines. There's the underground retention that Mr. Boyle mentioned. There's a lot of considerations that change if this goes from a rental product to a for sale product. And again, not that it can't be done. The way that it's being presented currently is as a for rent product.
So I think we need some guidance here, Mr. Brady, over for sale and
Yeah, I mean, we'll just say
apartments.
right
So
now today, I mean, the
it's-
staff we understand.
This is being presented as a multifamily
This
rental
is a
project.
for rent project as recommended by the staff. If someone asks, it's for rent. The idea that it could in the future become something else would mean it would have to come back to council. And there are just, Evan's being very nice about identifying those issues. But think about it, when it's an individual lot property owner, this idea of shared utilities, is very difficult and complicated. And so we can't have utilities crossing over other people's property. I mean, especially in a density like this, it's very, very difficult to separate them out and to be able to have a legal identification of a particular lot. So no, this is a rental, as it's the city staff as it's being presented, and we will continue to say it over and over again. This is only a rental, not until such time it comes back, or we pause. The other option is pause this, send it back, and come back as a for sale, and we'll evaluate it then.
Mr. Boyle, your comments on that?
Yeah, and that's just, we're working on taking some other ones that we're going through the process as rentals and are turning into for sale right now.
But what about this project?
I know, so we're learning how to do this. The process, when I first started doing this, it wasn't something that had to be very carefully defined. Now the way we're doing it has to be more carefully defined as we've been working on this. And we're doing one on another project, and it hasn't required extensive changes to the layouts of the streets and the units like that. So that's why I don't see this as a huge change. You run the utilities through the streets, they're held in common, the lots are individual like that. The underground retention, I think, is typically the biggest issue, and it's something that we've been able to work through on the other ones. And that's why I can tell you that the intent is for it to be for sale. If you need us to go through the entire process of changing that before we get there, then I guess I can talk to the developer about that.
Absolutely.
But should it be a decision point? Do we take any other
that's what I
apartment
was gonna
project that we have looked at, thousands of units over the year, and we have not said, we want it for sale or we want it for rent? We just said, is this a viable project? Is it serving the community? I don't know, as property owner rights prevail very strong in Arizona, I don't know if it's our position to start dictating that. That's one comment. The other comment is, until we change, I don't know, it's ordinance, whatever, at the state, in which has a contractor guarantee, I don't want to get into it because I'll misstate it, but there is an 8-year, 10-year guarantee when you do owner for sale units. And if you have noticed, there's a reason we get very few, rarely do we get a for sale product. We usually get for rent. And that's the biggest barrier, is because they have to guarantee it for the duration. I'm not going to state the ordinance, but I have heard this again and again and again from developers. We'd like to consider for sale, but it does not make sense. And for our financing, we can't do this. So I think there's a bigger issue. If we want to get in, stand for sale, that's important, and that's how we're going to have a decision point. We've got to fix things at the state. Otherwise, it's not a viable to push someone into for sale if it doesn't work for them.
Well, I don't think we're pushing anybody for sale product. The applicant has said the product would be for sale. So with that, I think it'd be best if the applicant and planning can have a conference and this massage this a little bit better and come back before our Monday meeting and give us some type of update about the for sale. If you're going to move towards a for sale, what's required of that, and where you're at today. If you're going to stay for a for rent product, then it can stand, and we'll consider the continuance on Monday. Is that okay, Tim, to talk with staff?
Yes, we've discussed it, and I'll continue to discuss it with them.
Okay. I didn't want to have this a long conversation, kind of, because we have still the budget component to go through. But I think that all of you need to weigh in and decide which direction you need to go. Would that be okay, Mr. Smith?
I just want to state on the record that I am totally opposed to making, whether we approve or disapprove this based on for sale or for rent. This is in a low-income census tract. It's great neighborhoods and stuff like that. We are not in a position, especially given the state ordinance law, whatever it is, to start dictating. We have not taken that position before. I think it's not customary to take that position, and making a decision point on that alone.
Thank you. Ms. Pillsbury.
I just also want to say, I'm in my 5th year on council. I've learned a lot over my first term. And my understanding is that the city doesn't get to dictate whether something is a rental or for sale. We never have. We've never taken that position. I've been told over and over and over again that we can't take that position. That's not our place to take that position. So I'm wondering, we all want for sale. We all know that. That's what they hear too. Everyone wants for sale units. We want it for our children and for our parents. There's some serious issues why that makes it really hard to pencil out. This underground retention, as I'm learning more about that issue, seems to be a big piece of it. And I think there's ways we can do it in our city with engineering and with planning and coming to a place, maybe changing the code on that makes sense to make it be able to pencil out so that we could get developers to come do these for sale options. But we cannot, as a city council, dictate. And when I'm hearing things like, I was going to approve this if it was for sale, but I'm not going to support it if it's, that's why I think we need to have the conversation. When there's statements like that being made, then it's forcing us to take a position on that, forcing you to do something. Of course, I would like to see this for sale. I think all of us would probably agree. That's what the neighborhood would want. Like, that's what we all want. But it's not our place, was my understanding, to make those kinds of
And I realized
statements.
recently we have had the conversation about for sale things, but if I want to differentiate, these are city-owned properties that we've had the discussion about for sale townhomes. It was on city property that we're developing, and when we are the owner of the land and creating that agreement with who's going to develop it, we have some say. We don't own this land. We should not take that position. Thanks.
Mr. Smith, do you want to give some guidance?
Yeah, I'll put maybe some more context on it. So generally zoning doesn't make a distinction of whether or not it's for sale or it's for rent. But this is a particular case, so you have to look at the larger context of this particular application in which the developer has said that they intend to sell this product. And if that's the intent and the city's trying to facilitate that, there are some additional steps that should occur before you approve the site plan to make sure that that happens. And so I think that's what staff is pointing out, that if we want to help facilitate the possibility for it to be for sale, they could subdivide this property, comply with all our zoning code, come back in a month with all those things compliant, and get approval, and they could still rent out all the property. And so, but if you move forward with it the way it is right now, what staff is saying, and also I've also seen this in some other circumstances, it's very difficult to switch it the other way. And so it's a matter of being able to facilitate it now for the possibility for sale, which is what the developers indicated. So I guess that's, in my mind, the context why this one's a little bit different than other cases.
Is that true of every multifamily that we've approved, that, like, it depends on how it's, do you say platted, or how it's, I don't know what the, anyways, like, I feel like we've approved a lot that we didn't know for sure if they were going to be for sale or for rental. But they have to do things up front in order for it to be.
They know, when they're in the process of getting approved, that conversation's already happened.
But that would be true of any multifamily who has done their zoning this way, would then have to come back to us. If they decided down the road to turn them into for sale, they would have to come back.
I would say the majority of multifamily doesn't talk about the fact that they're going to convert the ownership in the future. I mean, but if they were, they would know that we'd have that conversation on the front end.
Jim, is a rezone a legislative act?
It is.
Okay.
It is a legislative act, so you have full discretion to approve or deny this request.
So I've asked the applicant, I think it's just best just to go back together and talk about what direction you want to go, and then come back on Monday's study session, and we'll have an update then. So I don't think there are time constraints here. I think we can get this done correctly, given the right circumstances. So thank you, Mr. Boyle, and planning. So you have some direction here to move forward.
Thank you, Council.
Right, thank you.
Mayor.
With that, does council need a break? You ready to go? Okay, let's keep going. All right, item 2A is a presentation on the fiscal year 25-26 summary of the proposed budget. Brian and your team.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Welcome to the kind of the City Council kickoff budget presentations. So my name is Brian Ritchell. I am the Office of Management and Budget Director. Alongside me, I have Christy Griffin. She is the Budget Operations Coordinator. And so today what we'll be going through is the City Manager's proposed budget highlight, kind of an overview of the City Manager's proposed budget for fiscal year 25-26. A few things to note is attached to the agenda item is a council report that gives much more detail than what we'll be presenting this overview. Also, for the next month through April, selected departments will be coming up and giving their budget presentations in more detail than what we will hear. We're just going to highlight some of the main parts of the city manager's proposed budget. Also, something new, I know this was presented to the council last week in their strategic planning meeting by the CFO and Deputy City Manager Mike Kennington, is that we do have a link on the OMB budget site. So under the Office of Management and Budget page, if you click on the budget icon, there is a link to a questions and comments form that residents, citizens may go in there and submit any questions and comments about the budget. So we do have that updated for you, and there is a link on our webpage for that. So for getting into the annual budget, each year, the city of Mesa is required by state law to appropriate an annual expenditure budget and set a secondary property tax levy and associated rates. The annual budget sets the maximum expenditure limit for the fiscal year. So any of the budget, usually when we do the tentative, that sets the maximum expenditure limit. Also, a balanced budget means that total resources available to the city must be sufficient to cover the budget expenses. So when we say resources, that is both revenues and reserves to be able to cover the budgeted expenditures. So the theme, kind of to tailed out, follow up on the strategic planning meeting, the theme of this year's budget is core services. When we were going through the city manager's meetings with the departments, the theme that came through was really the core services of the departments. What are their core services that they do for the city and for the residents? So with that in mind, we also keep in mind the 5 principles of the general governmental funds. So the first one is balanced net sources and uses throughout the forecast.
Brian, we have a question.
Sorry, I already have a question. So the sources, you said, include revenues. Does it also include debt?
So that would be expense. So the resources, so yes, the resources are
To balance the budget?
to balance the budget. Resources are revenues that we come in. So yes, if we had a debt issuance, that would be paying for the debt or the.
So we're in the general governmental, right? We're talking general governmental.
Yeah.
So when you think of debt related to general governmental, that's general obligation bonds. So you kind of sit over here because the bonds are coming in and paying into capital. So it doesn't really flow through this part of the budget. Does that make sense? Because it's a secondary property tax.
Right.
It pays for, or I'm just, not utilities, we're just focused,
Right.
general obligation bonds. Those revenues come in, those bonds, to reimburse or to pay for capital projects during a year. That's where we're in the middle of getting ready to sell bonds. Right now, we made that presentation a month ago. So they're not in this presentation. They're kind of sitting over here in this capital area because it doesn't affect these sources and uses. Sales tax, urban and state shared use tax don't have any effect on debt. Debt is solely attached to the secondary property tax, and that's it.
Right, but to have a balanced budget.
Doesn't affect. They
You're
say
not-
balance within the
Okay.
secondary property tax. We can only issue as much debt as we can support from the secondary property tax.
So yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth. Mr. Brady, yes, when we look at the debt, it is to pay for the projects itself. Overall, citywide, the state statute requires that all expenditures can be covered by, as a balanced budget, would be resources and reserves. So the revenues and reserves. So revenues coming in to pay for any expenditure and also the reserve. So we do have different funds that do have reserves. We're going to be focusing on the general governmental funds right now. So those revenues and reserves to be able to pay for those operating expenditures.
But I just want to be
Okay.
clear, because sometimes people talk about debt on the
Yeah.
general obligation side. The general obligation side is solely attached to the secondary property tax. There is no contributions from any other source within the city that is collected. It's only what we can assess based on the secondary property tax. Sometimes a capital project that's funded by the secondary property tax will also, because of cost overruns, whatever, we may make a contribution, cash contribution from general governmental, but it is not an obligation. There's no obligation except for the payment of the, secondary property tax to pay off the debt. So that's a whole, that we kind of keep that separate than what you're going to see right here. What Brian is correct. If you want to see the in totality of the city's budget, it'll be in that number. But to me, that's a difficult.
Well, is that what the statutorily required budget balance? Does it include that whole thing or just what you're talking about today? I mean, I think if we're going to say, if the statute, it looks at the whole thing, then you have to include it.
So Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, the statute does look at the whole budget of the city. So for instance, if a municipality did not collect enough property tax, secondary property tax for their general obligation bonds, they would have to use other revenues or resources to be able to make those payments. So it's, in totality, yes, the state statute is just as a whole, the budget as a whole must be balanced between revenues.
Okay.
But we also, going down to Mr. Brady's point, we like to take a look at the major operating funds and to see how those revenues and resources are and balance those to make sure that we try to be structurally balanced, and I'll get to that.
Right, but I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
We do not issue more debt than can be sustained by the secondary property tax.
Absolutely.
And our capacity within the assessed value of secondary property tax, we're only at maybe 50% of what is available to us to assess against the property tax. So we have tons of coverage on top of us as far as the value of the city's secondary property tax to pay off our debt.
Okay.
Mayor, quick question, please.
Yes.
And not to get too far into the weeds, but it says balance net sources. That means there's a gross. Can you tell me the difference between gross and net?
So balance of net sources and uses. So net sources and uses is basically your revenues minus your expenditures. So that is your net sources and uses. So there's a line, we'll get to it in the.
It's a very simple, it's just all the money coming in, less all the money going out.
Okay, so there's not a top line, various
No,
reductions,
it's
net.
just the growth, it's just the total, use it, what comes in, what goes
So we
out.
almost don't need the word net. Okay, thank you.
The difference between,
That's the net.
Okay.
it's not a banker's, version of this. yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
So another one, principle is the 10 to 15% reserve balance over the 5-year forecast period. Sustainable of programs and services. Also, as we mentioned before, about a month ago when we came with the forecast, is keeping wages and benefits competitive compared to other valley cities. And then also investing in capital in life cycle replacement projects. So at the budget process this year, the city was focused its efforts on providing quality core services, but while addressing the following impacts, and these are some significant impacts. As council is well aware, we lost the residential rental tax, which is roughly about, for this general governmental fund, is about $18.5 million ongoing. The public safety sworn personnel benchmark, that was a significant impact that just came to us about a month ago. That has about a $23 million per year impact. And then also fleet maintenance and repairs, those costs have been increasing along with software and licensing, and then building maintenance and custodial services.
I'm sorry, Mary, I have another question. So I want a distinction between the rental tax, you said ongoing, the benchmarking, you said per year. So what distinction are you making?
Sorry, per year ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Okay,
you go
perfect.
forth, yes.
He's trying to use his vocabulary, but really, the thing that's important here to understand, you're going to see this in a minute. Think about that. $20 million a year lost revenue that was in our forecast previously. $20 million in new expenditures above and beyond what we expected in the budget for 5 years. The math is pretty simple, right? I mean, it's a big number that we're having to absorb over 5 years, right? I mean, it's, 20 million times 5 and 20 million times 5. And those are big, big numbers. And that's our challenge. And that's just isolated to issues. There's a whole lot happening underneath that inside the budget that we're trying to solve for that we'll highlight. But if you'll just keep that in mind, where we were when we started this conversation back in March and where we're going to show you where we are in April, it's really trying to solve for $200 million worth of impact, if you would, in the budget over the 5 years.
So with that, to strive towards a structurally balanced budget in fiscal year 28-29. So what we looked at was the forecast, and the city manager asked us to, okay, if we want to be structurally balanced in 4 years, what would that take? So what we did, the city manager requested departments to submit a net 2% reduction of their ongoing base budget. And the net 2%, I wanted to highlight that is because the way we looked at it was departments to look at reductions of their base budget by 2%. However, if they needed an enhancement request or wanted to start a new program, they had to reduce even more to offset that new program. So that's where I come up with the net 2%. So you can go and, if you didn't want any enhancements, you could go and reduce your budget by 2% and you'd be fine. But if you wanted to say, I need another staff member, well, then your reduction needed to be a little bit more to offset that. So we're looking at a net 2%. So when we came to.
Brian, question?
Yes, Mayor.
Real quick, Brian, do we look at when we ask staff to reduce, but if there is a project or a staff that actually increases opportunities for more funding, is that calculated in how you look at these things?
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, thank you for the question. Yes, that is in the calculation also. So it's a department does come up and say that, hey, we would like to create this new program, or we need this new staffing, but we have some revenues to offset that expense. Some either new revenues or increased revenues through fees. That does go into the calculation to be able part of that new net.
Well, and Brian, a good example, Councilman Heredia, is, for example, in our revenue collections section, if they, we would, what was their, they would come to us and say, hey, if we add another person, we could collect more revenues, and we say, okay, that's fine, but you got to cover twice as much as your costs. You're not, it's not a one-for-one. They'd have to have that center. So sometimes there are positions like that where someone said efficiencies, or we can collect more revenue if we have another staff member. I think we did that with the short-term rentals, right, to be able to enforce that. So those are areas where we're willing to consider that.
Let's go for it.
On this 2%, I'm a little confused. So in the simplest terms, if I took a department's budget from last year and from this year, it would be lower by 2%.
So
Not
Mayor,
necessarily.
Okay, so that's what I'm confused about.
No, that's Mayor, Councilmember Goforth. Good, thank you for the question. So what we took was what we consider their base budget. There's some one-time things in there. There's also life cycle that can be in a department's budget. So what we consider base is the budget they had previous year. So we took we took their current base budget of their commodities and services, contracts, things like that. And for this fiscal year 24-25, we said, okay, here's your base budget along with their personal services. So we look at their personal services and that base budget and say, okay, what is 2% of that? So when we calculate that out, we reduce 2%. They may have other things, as I mentioned, some other departments have life cycle things that they need to fund, but it's also in their department budget. We take that out because that's a separate discussion that we have with the city manager to say, okay, what do we want to do this year for life cycle or capital projects, things like that. So,
Councilmember, our goal in all this, maybe just to clarify, our goal was to get to 9.2% ongoing savings across the city. Now, what we realized, there's some departments, let's just take fleet, right? If we ask them to cut, what that means is it's going to impact police, right? They're not going to get vehicles out as fast as they can. It's going to impact our utilities. So it would create more difficulties downstream for other departments. So there's some departments where we said, give us your efficiencies. They gave us some, but we didn't do the same, 2% there. But I think we're going to show you overall, we still accomplished even more than we started with because we looked in other areas for other savings. So the goal was we had them all start at the 2% and we wanted to understand the impacts, right? But when Fleet comes and says, well, I can reduce 2%, but I'm going to have to lay off mechanics that work overnight to keep trucks going, make the Tahoes ready the next morning for the police. Well, now we're impacting services. So we go through that kind of analysis, right? I mean, we start with the 2% across the board. We have to be managers of, the situation. But I think at the end of the day, we end up achieving greater than, and the idea is to do 2% this year because we're going to think you're probably going to have to do it again in the next couple of years. We wanted to start off with 2%.
Well, I think those are the hard questions you have to have, right? When your revenues are less than your expenses.
Right.
So, and I think this is for later in your presentation, but we get down below our principal reserve balance by year 5. I don't know, the council needs to decide, is that acceptable or not? So if it's not, you're going to have to go back probably and evaluate those critical services and decide where. So anyway, that's later in the presentation, but I just, forewarning, that's sort of what I'm looking at.
Next slide.
Oh,
Well, that's a good thing because we look at this every year, and so we can forecast out.
And
The
Councilmember,
forecast
we've
changes a little
We've
bit.
brought forecasts like this in the past where the fifth year just doesn't quite make it. And we just say, that tells us we got to be careful, we got to be disciplined, right? Because we're already not meeting the goal. It's 5 years out. So we kind of think when we're, in this case, I think we're within 1.2% or something of that goal. But we realize we've got to start restructuring and bring to balance the difference between, you just said, a difference between the sources and the uses. This is a big, big ship, right? And so we start tweaking it, and it's just better. Our philosophy, my philosophy, is kind of like utility rates, right? It's a tweak, right? We have time to do it. Because if we didn't look at that fourth and fifth year, we would go, oh, wow, Mesa's doing great,
Right, yeah.
right? But we know that's not true because we've run it out 5 years. We see the difference. We're spending down the reserves. So we take time to say, okay, let's start working on that now. And gives us time, we can do it again next year. But it's just so hard, right? We saw what happened in less than a year where we lost $200 million, right? And
Yeah.
I'm hoping you find $200 million. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I think it's best
that's
practice, for
Just a
sure.
way of just
The-
kind of keeping us in
Yep.
check
Yep.
and not thinking about, oh, next year we're doing great. But we know that there's consequences down the road.
For sure.
So let's move forward with the presentation. I think I'll answer some of our questions too, and we'll have more questions.
Mayor, this next slide, I think, provides some context to the concerns that you're expressing, which is the declining reserve balance or projections over the next few years, because it does feel like we're spending down our bank account in order to live off of that, knowing that our income isn't high enough. But I know we also make adjustments to this, so could you speak to that as you discuss this slide?
Of course, Mayor, Vice Mayor Summers. So what you see in front of you, this is what we showed council on March 6th when we came with the forecast. This is what we were starting with. So what this includes was the 9.2 that the city manager mentioned of reductions, kind of estimated. We had an estimation because we haven't started the discussions with the department yet. This also includes the benchmarking for the public safety. So that was our starting point right here, was we needed to take a look at this and say, what adjustments do we need to make? And to the point, yes, in the far right-hand column, fiscal year 29-30, we dropped below, and even in 28-29, that 28-29 was the year that the city manager was looking for us to say, okay, what do we need to do? So we know in our forecast, what we do is we have some growth in revenues. We also have some growth in expenditures, and we're hoping that that growth in revenues outpaces the expenditures. However, with the economy, we're not sure if that's really going to happen. So he challenged the departments to take a look at their budgets and say, okay, what do we need to do to be able to be structurally balanced in that fiscal year 28-29, so we can get back up to that 8 to 10% or even higher through our principles.
I think the presentation earlier said 10 to 15.
So that is our mayor, vice mayor, that is our principles, is 10 to 15. The financial policy that is adopted on an annual basis by council is 8 to 10. So we strive to be above the policy as part of a principle. So because of the credit rating agencies, they like to see a little bit better.
And that was going to be
balance.
my follow-up question, and it's the same with utilities. How does this balance impact our GO rates and our bond rating?
We're holding steady right now. But they look at it, but we show them the same thing, we show council, and we tell them, listen, don't criticize us, don't bring us down for being conservative and using this as a tool, because then we show them, we have a slide that we show them, so it's like every year we come to you, we show you this fourth and fifth year number, it looks ugly, it's really bad, but here's how we've performed, right? 4 or 5 years later, we use it, and look, we've overachieved, we're in the 20%, we're in 15% or more. So they look, and we show them that history, like, listen, this is a planning tool, but here's actual performance. Our actual performance does very well, right? When you see these numbers, if I showed you this, we went back a year ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we call them the ugly charge. They're ugly, right? These fourth and fifth years, because 3 years ago, we're going, someday, we think it's gonna happen next year, there's gonna be a recession. So we built that in. Well, didn't happen. So it just keeps moving down. The point is we will outperform the fourth and fifth year, but we need to know it's a challenge now to make some choices and tough decisions, and that's what we're doing in this budget.
I guess my question is though, why would you forecast out to have your reserve fall below your policy?
Because that's what's happening. I don't have the change. I mean, the question is, do you want to dramatically change and cut programs today based on something that may happen 4 or 5 years from now? And not sure that that's, I mean, because the dynamics of what may happen, we don't have full control over, right? But if you're saying, well, we're going to reduce hours at libraries, close park community centers because we have a shortfall in year 4 or 5, but then 3 years from now, things are going better, you found other ways to be more efficient. It's just, you can do that, but that's why we took the 2% this year with the idea we'll do it again next year. And it's amazing how fast that 2% every year begin, and you'll see, right, here's where we are in March, you're gonna see a slide that says, now here's where we are in April, and we're making improvements, we're getting.
But I guess I challenge, why would you forecast out but not change your operations based on it? I mean,
We did. We took this March forecast and we made changes. And that's why you're going to see something different in April.
But to your question, do you cut service now because in year 5 you may fall below? Well, I mean, that's the point of the forecast, right?
No, it's not. It's not. It's intended to be a tool to identify that we do have some challenges in the future, and we can begin today to make the adjustments. We don't have to make the full adjustments. We have to believe we have momentum and we're moving in the right direction. I think you're going to see that in slide whatever coming up.
So does this assume 2% cut every year? Is that what this assumes?
Not in this one, but that's the point.
Okay.
It could happen, right?
Yeah.
And we'll show you the impact of the 2% and some other savings that we get really close to the goals we're talking about, and later in slide 14.
And does this 5 year out, you said you could look at our history, we always make it prior to 2020, because this 34%, I think a lot may be attributed to the influx of federal dollars that we got, don't you think? So I would like to see, prior to that, did this look?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
3-4 years
Okay.
before we were in the 30s. The economy was doing, when we came out of COVID, everybody thought we were going into a recession. Instead, we saw a building boom in Mesa,
Yeah.
right? So we have to parse out what are those one-time slugs of money, but construction still holding its own, sales tax is still holding its own. So, we keep thinking it's gonna, listen, we build in a recession for 5 years. We think it's gotta happen. Something's gonna slow down. And we're seeing things slow down, but that's what is included in here. And the last 4 to 5 years, fortunately, we've been wrong on the economic forecasting side of it.
But over 18 years, Chris, you've been really good.
Well-
So I appreciate that.
You've averaged
even
out
though,
well.
yeah, you're.
I'm trying to leave you with the idea that you can solve this problem. And we don't have to try to do it, but we don't want to compound the problem either, right? There's always a temptation to add more. We got to be careful. That's part of the messaging too. And that's one way I can message to my departments is, listen, there's not a lot of opportunity for new growth in here. But there are some programs, obviously we're going to bring some programs to you that says, no, these are programs you really need to do. And we're going to talk about those.
And I think your presentation, as you get to slide 14, will discuss how this fund balance got pretty rich. We got a lot of money in the bank. And I think-
before? Now?
Meaning the reserve.
Now, not
Reserve
later.
fund, yeah, I need to be clear about that. The reserve fund is what I'm referring to as the bank. Some people would say that's too much money in the bank. So
We've heard
as
that.
you do your
But
presentation.
thank
maybe
goodness
well,
we have it.
Yeah, right now.
Well, we're drawing it down too, so continue on, right?
So thank you, Mayor. So the strategy that we used for the reductions, so as you see, the goal was about $9.6 million. However, a total of $11.2 million of ongoing expenditures have been reduced from the budget and forecast. A couple of them were the police department. They were asked to do $5 million, and the fire and medical department was asked to do $3 million. However, instead of doing it all in 1 year, the city manager is allowing them to phase it in over a 3-year period. So what the police department came up with was a $2.36 million reduction, and what they were looking at is there's some of it of incentive pay that they had in there. Also, they incentive for the perfect attendance, they looked at some of the materials and supplies that they had that they could reduce. They also have 6 part-time vacant positions, and I want to reiterate vacant. So the process we went through was looking at vacant positions. There was no filled positions that we looked to reduce. So any vacant positions that they didn't feel they needed, they presented to the city manager, and a decision was made on those.
Could you just clarify, is the proposal to eliminate incentive pay for attendance, or?
It is the perfect attendance.
Yeah, the only concern I would have, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but to take a look at this, by reducing that incentive, there's potential to increase the overtime.
So
I'm just going to put that on the table. You don't have to answer it. Yeah.
What was it again?
If you reduce the incentive, there's a potential to increase overtime.
Yeah,
but there's a lot
the
of
incentive wasn't as successful as we had hoped. We weren't paying you out a
that is
lot.
fair enough.
How's that?
So mayor, vice mayor, when the PD comes up to do their presentation, they'll talk a little bit more about that, and they'll be here next week.
This comes from them too.
Yep.
We're
So they can give you more
They believed
details
it
on that
wasn't
reduction.
getting-
It's a spider web of things.
It
you
wasn't
touch on
achieving the
one.
outcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then fire and medical, what they were proposing is 8 positions that are programmed in the 5-year forecast for medical response units, and 1 pre-recruit position. Other things that were reduced was $4.5 million. It was the removal of the downtown Wi-Fi program in the 5-year forecast starting in 28-29. This was initiated by the ARPA funding. So with the ARPA funding, the city looked at the downtown to put routers for free Wi-Fi in the downtown area. So what we looked at was, in 5 years, those routers would need to be replaced, and the cost of that replacement is forecast to be $4.5 million. So currently, right now, we have taken that out of the budget for that replacement. Other reductions were 13 vacant positions throughout the departments, and some of those departments they will be presenting on of those reductions. And then also continued to support street safety and operations. What we did is we reallocated the police motor officers to the local streets fund to help the general governmental fund support. So the funding for those police officers, actually the motor officers that are strictly for street safety, that patrol the streets for the street safety, will be allocated into the local streets fund.
Will all of these things be addressed in
Yes,
future
in the
presentations?
departmental budget, yes. That one will come up in the PD budget.
What about the Wi-Fi, the downtown Wi-Fi?
Not necessarily. Would you like, I mean, it was something.
Well, then I'll just ask, do we have data if that's like been really successful?
Oh, okay.
Well, if
we
it
can
gets
bring-
used
that's
a
great
lot,
question.
like that
Let
kind
us
of stuff.
let us
Like,
bring
are a
that
lot of
too.
people going to be like out of?
Right.
I mean, do they just have to go to McDonald's? I mean, I don't know. There's other places to get free
Fair enough.
Wi-Fi,
We can talk
so
about
I would
it,
like to know some details on that.
Yeah.
So some of the resources we looked at also were $11.8 million. We reallocated some available one-time resources to be able to put in as kind of a one-time buffer for the forecast. Another one was $5.7 million. We increased projected ongoing revenues from building permits. We see that building permits are staying pretty steady. We're seeing a slight reduction in residential, but commercial is going up. So what we did is we readjusted our building permits. Also, there will be $1.5 million in the forecast of adjusted parks, recreation, and community facilities. So basically PRCF, their fees, they'll be coming and kind of detailing that when they present on Monday.
Brian, the reallocation of available one-time resources, can you explain that a little bit more?
So yes,
I mean, I
Mayor.
understand what all those words mean, but what are you really saying?
So Mayor, Councilmember, go forth. So what we looked at was any projects or anything that came in under budget that we allocated resources to, we look at that as one time. So say we had a project or a contract and it was say for $1 million, but it came in at $750,000. What we took was that $250,000 savings, we reallocate it and say, okay, we had it set aside, and now we're going to bring it back into the general governmental fund. And so that helped with kind of the one time of being able to support some of the other services.
Okay, so my question's kind of on the process. So when you have a savings, you set that, you don't, that's not the normal course, is to put it back into the budget?
Through the year, well, that's what we did, right? It's just, we wait for the full year and we have to kind of ask the questions, what's the status of the project? Is it fully completed out? There's no more expenses. So that's what we do on an annual basis, and as a result of what you're just saying, we're finding these. Well, we also
So this isn't anything new?
We try to do this every year, right? We try to
Okay.
identify, or projects that we're saying, and we'll show council, there are projects that just haven't moved forward and they're kind of, turf to zero-scape projects that we're funding that around some city facilities that are just, they're way over budget now. So doing the project would cost a lot more than we have in the budget, and we're just saying, we got to pass on this, so we'll take the money and use it for savings. So things like that.
Thank you.
So Mayor, Council, it wasn't all reduction exercise. There were some enhancement requests that were approved by the city manager to move forward into the budget. Departments submitted $10.2 million in one-time and ongoing requests to increase services/programs or start new programs. 7.1 in requests were approved, and you can see a few of those there. Some of the requests, we had $500,000 to increase cancer screening for the fire department. Another one is $1.1 million for public safety support services for the police department and fire department. And then also we had I'll go with the net of $1.3 million of funding for Sun Air operations, but while phasing out the Windermere operations. That was now included. And then also one-time funding for the current heat relief program to support it through summer of '26. Other requests, unfortunately, that were not approved. Some of them are the expansion of the heat relief program to the east side. We wanted to keep it concentrated on the west side for now, and then we can reevaluate. Another one is $573,000 of ongoing funding for the community outreach and heat relief program. That was just ongoing funding. We wanted to say, let's do one time, then we'll reevaluate it next year. Another is around $100,000 for a community outreach and read runner position for the library. And then also what we needed was $6 million of deferred city facility maintenance. So that is deferred maintenance on some of the facilities. They were looking, facility management was looking for a $6 million ongoing in their budget every year, $6 million for deferred maintenance. And then Parks and Rec, we're looking for $3 million annually each year for deferred park maintenance. So, but that request for ongoing was not moving forward. However, we do in our process each year, look at it every year to see, okay, what do we need to do to fund those maintenance?
Mayor.
Ms. Spilsbury.
So on this slide, will these things be talked about in presentations as far as the things that they requested but weren't approved?
Not likely unless you would like us to.
So for like the city facilities or parks, like can we see a list of like which ones are?
We can provide those.
Being deferred or something, but that wouldn't be part of their presentation necessarily.
We could make it part of parks, they're coming up, but facilities is just an evaluation of 1 million square feet of space.
Right, there's a lot.
Here's what it would take to bring it up to a certain standard, and just can't do it.
Like it's a priority list or something?
It's I guess it's priority, it's just identifying every facility and what is needed coming into the future to maintain it, whether it's the roof, the air conditioning, just the regular maintenance, and the fact that what we've added though is positions to facility maintenance so that they can do a better job of getting and doing the regular maintenance, so we don't have as much deferred maintenance. So that's how we've tried to address some of it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, a lot of times the strategy is to take care of things before they get super bad, right? Like, so that's why I'm.
So we're going to start there first. I think
Okay.
is kind of the goal with trying to address some of our maintenance, because obviously it's a lot cheaper for us to do it that way than have a catastrophic failure of a system, but
Okay.
we just know we have a lot, we have, is it 1 million square feet? Am I saying that right, Candace?
Yeah, over a million.
Well,
We talk about facilities.
Facilities,
buildings.
yeah, that we're responsible for. We've added a lot recently.
Right.
It's just staying on top of it.
Okay. And then as far as the heat relief stuff goes, will we have a presentation at some point about our efforts for the heat relief heading into the summer?
Yeah.
And so we can see a map if, like, I'm guessing there's some nonprofits that handle some of the east side
It is, but it's
needs.
amazing how much demand we get. What we were tracking is how many people were coming from the east side
Okay,
into
into
these.
the,
And
that's,
so
that's kind of my question.
And
was-
we've identified with the county, we can identify the heat-related deaths, and with the fire department, their responses. And we certainly have a concentration on the east side that we were hoping. We had asked for a plan to how to address it, but we're going to struggle just to keep the current heat relief center up.
Okay, but that will be a
But it is in the budget
presentation.
right now
Okay.
for the next year.
So with all of that, with the reductions and enhancements, here's a graphical form of the sources and uses of the general governmental fund. So the green is the revenues, and then the red, of course, is the expenses. Then the blue is the the reserve balance percentage. So as you see, we moved up a little bit. We're at the very end there at fiscal year 29-30, we're just below 10%. We're, I think, about around 8%. As you see, as I was mentioning, the expenditures, they do grow in the outer years. However, what we're looking and hoping for is that the economy keeps going and the revenues outpace that. So out in the outer years, in 5 or 6 years, that our revenues will then surpass our expenses. So in the next chart is the table is what we're looking at. So this includes everything that I presented just previously, brief overview of the reductions of the $11 million, the enhancements, all those things. Now this is the forecast that we're looking at as the city manager's proposed budget. The proposed budget is in 25-26. So with that, we're looking at a net sources and uses of using some of our fund balance of about 53.7 million. We still have a 1-year healthy reserve percentage of 24.5. However, you see the net sources and uses, we are still drawing down that fund balance. And in the outer year, the 29-30, we are about 7.8%. So we're just a little bit below the policy set, which is 8 to 10%. So that's what we're striving to do, is bring that up. But however, what you see too is that those net sources and uses, it is getting closer to zero, and that's what we're looking for.
Quick question, please. Can you go back to the chart, the line graph? And this is probably a newcomer's question more than anything else. So I'm looking at the financial principles, and the top one says balanced net sources and uses. This graph doesn't show that to me. So can you help me see how we get from the principle to what I'm looking at here? You see the disparity I'm asking about?
I see. However, if you look on the next page, it actually would help. It would, I think, be a little bit
The page you
easier
had up before?
No, the page after, slide 14. So Mayor, Councilmember
14.
Adams. So if you, slide 14.
This one, okay, okay, please, go ahead.
So if you look in the middle right there where it says net sources and uses, so that is where we come up with our total sources, so basically total revenues, and then we have total uses, which is our total expenses. So netting those together, one's a positive, one's a negative, netting those together, that becomes our net sources and uses. We either have a positive net sources and uses or a negative net sources and uses. Positive means, yes, our revenues are coming in higher for that 1 year than our expenses. So with a negative, that means our revenues that we collected for that 1 year are not sufficient enough to support those expenses for that 1 year. So then we have to use our reserves to be able to.
But I think the council is
I
correct.
get
We are
that.
not achieving,
But yes.
we're not achieving that
So,
principle. You're
Okay,
right.
I get that, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that definition. I've been in business operations for a while, so if I put this in the private sector, that's my profit or loss.
That
Right.
is,
So you're
Okay.
correct. We're not meeting that.
So we're
goal.
not meeting the goal.
Nope, we're not.
Thanks, that, just all the clarification I
Does the
wanted.
word balance mean zero?
Before that
should it
particular
be a
year, we call it
zero?
structural balance, right? The different, yeah, absolutely. We're not structurally balanced in this budget. But you would, if you see this, right, you would have to cut out $16 million out of the budget or have, between that and new resources.
18
Again,
million? No, what's the 16?
well, at the end of the
Oh, the
forecast,
end
you're close to
116.
16.
But this year's 54.
Right. Right, that is correct, for this 1 year. But that's why you look out 5 years, right? Because if you just did a 54 million, which would be a
Right.
very dramatic impact.
Right.
Right, it would be 5 times what we're doing today, then that would be great, but then you wouldn't really need it because you can see in the next years, you would be able to absorb that.
Is it just a matter of trying to decide how much of your reserve balance you're using?
You're trying to be careful not to spend it down too quickly, absolutely. That's why it's there. Councilman Heredia pointed this out, because if we go back the last 3-4 years, our reserves have been over 30%, right? And people were complaining that it was too big. And so we held on to it because we always were conservative that way. But, now I can say, count our many blessings, because now we've not, being hit with $200 million in the forecast. Okay, in 20 years, that's, except for 2009, 10, or whatever, we had the Great Recession when it happened overnight and it was $60 million. This is a big pill to swallow. And I guess what we're saying is we don't know how to swallow that in 1 year or 2 years, but we do think there's a path forward. If we try to be disciplined over the next, 3 years, we can solve this problem. You can see we made progress already, right? The forecast in March reserves was 44 million. We're back up to 61.8. If you can do that every year, you're going to get balanced, right? So in 1 year, we went from 44 to 60, right? And so as far as the ending reserve in that 5th year, we believe that every year for the next couple of years, the city can do that, right? As long as it's disciplined and not adding, again, it's that net concept, right? You can't keep adding more programs and services unless you're cutting back that much plus what you need to solve this problem. But again, we made a big improvement from March to April, and we think with, being very careful about managing our budgets here, a year from now, you can have the same conversation, and you'll get very close. I think maybe it's a 2-year cycle, and you'll have a balanced budget, assuming no other variables show up between now and then. There's no recession, that there's no legislative action that's going to impact cities.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. But we're dealing with this we're just dealing with this very unusual convergence of these two, this legislative action by the state and this extraordinarily increased inflation in wages, which we have to do. It's just wasn't in any forecast before this, right?
Certainly the legislative action, but we entered into an MOU to benchmark every 2 years.
But we had
So-
no idea that these wages were going to go up by 15%. Not when we entered into that agreement, or we would put a cap on it. But then you would be in this non-competitive state of recruiting police and firemen, right? So what are your choices? Okay.
So Mayor and Council, so this is the, moving on for the next one. If there's no other questions for the General Governmental Fund, we'll move on to the Utility Fund. So the Utility Fund has similar principles that we follow, a balanced net sources and uses. We look for a 20% or higher reserve balance, rate adjustments that are predictable and smooth throughout the forecast, equity between residential rates and non-residential rates, and then also maintaining affordability for our utility services. So the budget pressures for the utility fund, I think we mentioned these in March when we were showing the forecast. Fleet maintenance and repairs have increased, especially even buying new trucks or anything for the utilities. The solid waste disposal fees increased significantly. We saw a significant increase in water commodity costs. Also, just operating the plants with chemicals increased. And then the two bottom ones, the 91st Avenue Water Reclamation and the Val Vista Water Treatment Plant. Just a reminder that we participate in a joint venture in those, so those are both run by the city of Phoenix, so those costs have also significantly increased. So what the city manager asked the utility departments to do was the same. He asked the departments to submit a net 2% reduction on their ongoing base budget. And when we did that, this includes that 2% or in there. This is just a reminder, this is the forecast that we presented in March. And so we were, in March, we had within our policy, if you look at fiscal year 29-30, we were right in between, we're almost 9% in between that 10 and or 8 and 10% for our policy. We were looking to solve for the 2 years previous to that, the 25 or 27, 28, 28, 29 with that. So when we were going through our department presentations with the city manager, the departments then came forward and a total of 1.4 million expense reductions were submitted. 1.1 was reduced from the budget. So, and this was more through efficiencies in operations, but then also additional revenue strategies that are continued to be explored. And I know some of those departments will come and discuss with those when they do their department budgets in a few weeks. Some of the resources that we're looking at to help with the operations was an update on gas utility development agreements to cover administrative costs. Also, a new agreement with the Mesa Public Schools is for cost recovery, would be an additional $168,000 a year. And then also an increased revenue from solid waste barrel audits of about $150,000. The barrel audits have not been performed since 2017. And I know solid waste, when they come up here, they'll talk about a little bit more in detail of what a barrel audit is. It's basically if someone has 2 barrels, but they're only being charged 1 barrel. We will go out and do some audits of that to make sure that they're being either charged for 2 barrels or if they want to return that barrel so they don't be charged for 2 barrels, things like that. So.
Mayor, Brian, what's happening between, with that dip down below, between the 26, 27, 27, 28, where we dip down below our policy?
So majority of that, a significant portion of that is the purchase of solid waste trucks. We have a significant amount of solid waste trucks that need to be replaced, and that's where they fall in those years, is that one-time expense. That's why we start growing back out of it, is because of those one-time expenses, but our ongoing is able to keep up for those next following years.
And Councilmember, that's where we struggled, right, with equipment and solid waste. There were days where we had minimal number of trucks, and we just, it's a huge impact on this fund, but it's kind of like we still have to provide the service. And we're going to come back with some ideas that we're exploring on solid waste to create maybe just a change in how we provide that service, what we're used to as far as how often we come by and pick up garbage. We need to consider all the options on the table.
So those were down due to maintenance issues, right?
Well, they were just literally burning up. They were maintenance. They were they were just.
And we had to go out and rent.
We had to go rent.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that presentation several months ago that also included the cost of maintenance for this older equipment, which is significantly higher than the new equipment coming in.
So those life cycle, did they just wear out faster than we thought? I mean, because I know they're on a certain cycle, right? Did it happen? And we were kind of caught off guard.
No.
Sherry, come on up.
Oh, Sherry, oh, there she is, okay. And she can do this during your presentation too, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, thank you.
But just quickly, Sherry, and then you can just tease us for your presentation that you're going to give us later.
We're excited about it.
Okay, yes. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so our trucks, during the last few years, we experienced the age of the fleet was increasing, and when it increases, they're down a lot more. So we experienced a shortage in parts and a shortage in even getting our trucks. So we went on a 3-year cycle. So our replacement cycle on those trucks really got extended because the industry slowed down in manufacturing large, equipment. It was across the United States. And so as that equipment ages, they're literally rolling factories, right? It's not just a regular F-150. So every part on there moves and shakes every time they're running. So the longer we run them, the more they break down. And then just with shortage of parts and actually just manufacturing them, the age really creep up there, and that affects our operations significantly. You're welcome.
When we acquire equipment, do we capitalize and depreciate, or do we just take the expense right then, write the check, take the expense? How do we do that?
So Mayor, Councilmember Adams, for the budget purposes, we do that expense right then and there. For financial statement purposes, we depreciate over the years. So for the budget itself, we look at the expense because that's when the check is going out. That's part of the budget. So, but then when financial services, IRMA does the act for financial statement purposes, we have to depreciate out, so they depreciate it out.
Thank you.
As you leave, I'll say I'm looking forward to your presentation because looking at the routes is an innovative way. I know, like this morning, I had 1 bag of garbage. My wife and I just don't produce as much. The neighbors, of course, overflowing, 3 kids.
Yeah.
But there are areas within the city where we probably don't need to collect but every 2 weeks. So
Those are some
Call
thoughts.
your neighbors trashy?
Hey, I do too.
wow, no, but you did.
We want to at least have that conversation with council.
Yeah, no, families do. So I'm interested in that.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian, continue on.
So moving on to some of the enhancement requests on slide 21. They submitted 1.4 million in one-time and ongoing requests. So around 950,000 in requests were approved. Some of those were 5 additional utility locators with the fiber to premise going on, and just the expansion of the magma area and things going around the city. We needed to add 5 more utility locators. Also, that was included is about 273,000 for the Bartlett and Skiff interconnect facility feasibility study. And I know Water, when they come up and do their budget presentation in a couple weeks, they will be talking a little bit more about that. And that is for water security. And then also 90,000 for the fire hydrant maintenance program around the city. So with those reductions and enhancement requests, here is an updated utility fund proposed budget forecast. And so as the city manager mentioned, in this 1 year, 25-26, this next coming up year, we're sitting, the fund balance is healthy. We have around a 12.1 percentage balance. However, what we're trying to solve for is those outer years of where we dip below our financial policy of that 8 to 10%. We start in the fiscal year 29-30 to start coming back out of it. However, we still need to be conscious of those other 2 years before that of bringing that up. We know some of it is one-time expenses for the solid waste. However, we still need to be cautious of that net sources and uses. As you see, the net sources and uses do significantly increase throughout the year to where we become structurally balanced in the 29-30. However, those expenses in the previous years are what's drawing down that fund balance.
So Mayor and Council, obviously there's a lot more work to be done in this fund. We will be coming back to council and having some discussions about making sure that as we have new growth coming into the city, that's helping pay for the additional capacity that's needed. So we have some ideas what that might look like. That would certainly help out in the future. We also want to continue to evaluate the rates related to commercial. As the commercial users have become the totality of our water users, we want to make sure they're paying their share of that, and we've made some significant increases in rates this past year. We're going to keep evaluating that to make sure we're capturing all that cost. So we have more work to do. We will have this discussion with the utilities when they come and present to you, but it'll be something ongoing all the way through the summer as we anticipate the conversation in the fall when we bring the proposed rates to you.
So with that. oh,
One
sorry,
last
Mayor.
slide.
So with that, Mayor, Council, the budget process calendar, as you see in front of you, is this whole month of April. Selected departments will be coming up and presenting their departmental budgets to the council. And then on May 1st will be the review of the tentative budget and review of the non-utility capital projects. And then again, I kind of asterisk the May 7th and May 14th, we'll have those budget and finance open house community meetings. The first one will be at Red Mountain, and then the next one will be at the Post. And then on May 19th will be the adoption for consideration by council of the tentative budget for fiscal year 25-26, and then on through the rest of the capital improvement program and the secondary property tax in June.
The community meetings start when?
So the thank you, Mayor. The community meetings are on May 7th and 14th. They will start at 6 p.m. and they'll go from 6 to 7 p.m. Any resident is more than welcome to come in. We will have different areas, and so this will be concentrated on financial transparency. Also, we'll have Office of Management and Budget there with some budget charts. And then we will also have the financial services, Irma and her staff there with the ACFR and other financial things there at the community meeting.
Great. Ms. Pillsbury?
Are the meetings, is the purpose of the meetings informational or to get feedback?
So the mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, it is both. It's to get feedback and then also it's informational.
So looking at the calendar, if we're going to adopt a tentative budget on the 19th, that's 5 days after the second meeting. I know we have a council meeting the next morning. Like, do we have an opportunity to get the feedback and to look at what residents are saying to be able to do anything with it?
Mike, why don't you talk about that? We already have that meet now. It doesn't have
That
to.
people can be giving, so it's not like they have to wait till
May
7th or 14th.
right, yeah.
So
to get
Mayor,
feedback.
Councilmember Spilsbury, yes, what I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we have a link if they go on to the budget section of the Office of Management and Budget. There is a link right now that is working that they can submit either any comments or questions, and that it will get to staff, and then we can then go ahead
And staff is currently, like, as we go, responding to some of those questions?
If they ask for a response from the staff, then
Okay.
yes, we would be responding.
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, and Holly, the city clerk will also provide council a report, a log of those comments and questions and answers periodically. I think we're going to do it every weekly, but don't quote me on that, so that you'll be able to see those comments and questions and answers.
Okay, that's what I was just wondering is, we obviously want to hear what, any feedback there is, and so what that looked like. Thank you.
Mr. Adams?
How are we going about making the public aware that that link exists, other than it appears on the website? Are we doing any outreach? And if we are, of what kind?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, we're working with Anna and the PIO office of seeing how we want to put that out there on social media, and also it is on the front page of the city's website. In the scrolling up top, there's the scrolling
For the Channel
news.
11. Okay. Channel 11 has it scrolling across the meetings.
So we'll do as much.
And we can give you a link that you can send out to people too.
Sure. Thanks.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I do have the link. Appreciate that. Back on the previous slide, just a question on this, and maybe this is going to be part of our conversation. There it is. Okay. So as part of your projection, here too we see using the reserve balance. As part of your projection, reserve balance, have you factored in some of the deferred capital improvements that we've done in order to make this balance out for 4 or 5 years from now?
So for the utility fund?
Yeah.
So the utility fund, yes, we work closely with the utility departments in their maintenance schedule. And so what we do is we have in the forecast issuance of new debt that would help with their projects, either if it's repairs and maintenance or any new projects. We do have a forecasted new issuance of debt in there at a certain amount, and that it does grow over the next years, that we would use that as part of their deferred maintenance and any maintenance and repairs that they need.
Yeah, and it's not just maintenance, it's I think there's some capital projects too. Wasn't it like 100 million in water and 80 million in wastewater? Maybe I got that reversed, but that was.
So yes, we do go through during the CIP process and life cycle process. We do work with them
And that's
on the
already figured
schedule
in this?
for and what we could fit into the forecast. That's what we work and put in the forecast with them.
Probably the
of their
biggest
schedule.
driver of utilities, which shouldn't surprise anybody, right? It's a capital-intensive fund. It's not, the general fund is just, it's mostly people, right? 70+% is driven by personnel because it's a service delivery operation. Here, it's capital. And so that debt service, those capital schedules have tremendous effect. Garbage trucks, water treatment plants, major pipelines bringing water to the city. So we have to, that's where we try to manage being able to keep up with that capital, to meet growth, to meet maintenance of older pipes that need to be replaced. All that has to play in, and so we try to manage, because that debt payment has the tremendous effect on these balances here. And so we're always trying to make sure we're keeping debt costs down, but on the other hand, we need the capital to deliver the services in the city. So it's an ongoing challenge, but this assumes a certain level of capital development within the forecast and that debt service payment to support.
And I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that it was forecasted because we
It's
show
built
an
in.
increase in the reserve fund over the intermediate term, we'll call it. But I want to know that those projects, even though we deferred them, they're
I see what you're
still
saying.
necessary
Absolutely,
to.
and they're
right?
still in the forecast.
As long as they're built
They're still in the
baked into the
forecast. We don't kick them out of the forecast, we just try to manage them within the timeframe.
All right.
Mr. Redia.
I think just a question for maybe when the presentations come on utilities, if in the supporting documents, I know in the past, we've asked how many customers, residents it impacts, like when we're changing gallons per year or the tier levels. And I know we haven't had sometimes that information on like the amount of people that could potentially be impacted by those changes in either the tiers or the increases. So if we can have
So
in
how
those
many customers
pieces-
fit in each of those
Yeah,
tiers?
yeah,
Okay.
just in the supporting docs, when those
Okay,
conversations
we may
come
have
back.
that for the budget, but that would be good for the fall
Yes, so
probably.
that's what I mentioned.
fall,
So
right? So-
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, we usually have that for when we talk about the adjustments to the rates themselves.
For sure.
The budget, we usually don't, but we can see what we can do. But that discussion usually happens when we have the rates in the fall.
For sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, council. Thank you, Brian, your team.
Can we just get approval now and just save a lot of time?
Okay, we'll go to item 2B here from our Transportation Department. Transportation, if you'll come up. Okay, 5-minute break. Transportation gets set up.
You're gonna miss all the fun now.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Councilmember Adams will not be joining us. He's excused. And Transportation, Eric and your team, Orlando, let us have it.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. We're excited to be here. I was going to say you've talked about all these different budget funds, and then we're going to throw 3 or 4 different funds at you here in this presentation. But with me, I have Orlando Otero, our Deputy Director over our Field Ops side of Transportation, and I have Chase Carlisle, our Support Services Administrator also. So really quickly in this presentation, we're going to touch on transportation's mission. We're going to highlight some projects and performance measures over the past year, and then we'll get into our annual budget. So really quickly, our mission as a transportation department is to serve the public, and it's really to plan, design, operate, and preserve or maintain a safe and efficient transportation system. And we do this in 3 different ways. and what we're going to be talking today about our operation and maintenance budget is really, we want well-maintained assets. And in the transportation department, we're more than just asphalt. Asphalt's the biggest driver, but we have crews that maintain street lighting, landscaping, concrete, traffic signals, and to keep our right-of-ways clean, whether that's sweeping, whether it's just picking up debris, or making sure our alleys are clean also. We want to operate our transportation system that we have. We want to operate it safe, first and foremost, efficient and efficiently for all users. And then we're always looking at ways to be more environmentally sustainable. I know that seems maybe strange when we're in the asphalt and business, but I think, you know, our department over the past 5 to 10 years has really looked to ways that we can be more environmentally sustainable. Orlando will touch on our LED conversion project, and our staff does a great job of looking to recycle materials into our asphalt and other things whenever possible. Just really some notable projects that we want to highlight. I won't spend a lot of time. The council approved the 2050 Transportation Master Plan in December. That was an 18-month process for us to work through. And now we're coming up on the end of a 15-month study we had federal Safe Streets for All money to do a comprehensive safety action plan where we were assessing all the fatal and serious injury crashes that we've had in the city of Mesa over the past 6 years, and have some good results from that.
All right, like Eric mentioned, I'm going to go over a few field operations performance measures and project updates. The first one is All Streets Pavement Condition Index. So as Eric mentioned, asphalt's our biggest asset. We have over 1,500 center lane miles of roadway that we maintain. So to put that in perspective, it's like driving from Mesa to New Orleans. It's a lot of roadway that we maintain. Our staff is doing an outstanding job at maintaining our current PCI at 81.7, which is exceeding our PCI target of 70. Below 70, that's when we start talking about different types of pavement preservation. We try to maintain above 70. Here's a good slide that kind of shows you the different types of seal coat applications that we use and the PCI. 100 is obviously the best. Anything under 50, we look at trying to maintain with pavement preservations. If it's something that we can maintain, then we then consider doing a 2-inch mill and overlay and then restarting the pavement preservation process all over again. Okay. All right, so landscape refurbishment. We're going to highlight 2 projects in the downtown area. So the first one is a new employee wellness center that was just built. We worked with facilities and engineering to install the landscape at the facility there. It came together very nice. It looks good. I believe that there's going to be some trees planted there by facilities. Transportation did not do that yet, so we'll continue to work with them to see if we can get some trees planted. With this project, we're going to extend. We're going to extend the landscape in front of Benedictine on Hibbert over to Main. So that would be a project that we're going to focus on probably next fall. Okay. So the downtown tree planting and irrigation project is another project that we're doing downtown. So in September, we started a 3-phase approach to install trees downtown. It's been actually going pretty good. We just started phase 3 last week, and we're hoping to have that completed by the beginning of May. It's been a good thing. The business owners have really liked that we're taking some resources and actually putting the trees in downtown. For years, we've had some irrigation issues that we had to fix. That was a challenging part. Fortunately, we were able to repair those, and the trees that we're planting will have water and hopefully grow. So the total number of trees that we did plant downtown, or we're going to plant downtown, is 117 trees. Okay. All right, street light LED conversion. So this project we started back in fiscal year 1920. We should be completed in January of 2026. We have converted over 42,000 streetlights with about 3,500 remaining. Most of those streetlights that are remaining are on arterial roadways. So this has just been a good overall project. And I do want to say that because we took this in-house, we were also able to install smart nodes. So that smart node technology allows us to monitor lights, monitor efficiency. When there's an outage, it lets us know, so we're not having to ride lights or rely on residents to call the lights in. So basically, we're proactive with that technology, and again, it allows us to dim, which has been some requests within some districts.
Just before we get into some budget numbers, I just want to go over all the transportation funding sources that we have, both for our operational and maintenance budget, which we'll go over today, and then just quickly go over how we fund capital and life cycle projects also. So in transportation, we have a lot of dedicated funds that have to be used for transportation purposes. And the two main ones are local street sales tax. So we have a 0.3% sales tax here in Mesa that's dedicated to transportation maintenance and operations. And then the Highway User Revenue Fund, which is all the state funds from the gas tax and license fees and such that come in. In the next slide, you'll see those are our main two revenue sources for maintenance. Other funds that we have the environmental compliance fee that we use for certain areas in transportation. I'll highlight, we have the utility fund and general fund on here. That is work that we do either for the utilities. Let's say water has a pipe that breaks and we need to go in and patch the street, or facilities needs a parking lot to be paved. That's where those funding sources come from. And then I'll highlight the photo enforcement fund. We receive about $1 million each year from the photo safety enforcement that we reinvest back into safety projects on the transportation network. So those are our main revenue sources for maintenance. The capital and life cycle, when we're building new projects, we typically fund those projects using bonds. We have the half-cent sales tax in the region that currently is Prop 400 that expires here at the end of the year and will convert over into Prop 479. And we look for federal grants. We have a fancy name here called the Transportation Fund. That's where all of our reimbursements come back from the regional sales tax that we can then reinvest in. And then we do use HERF and local street sales tax for life cycle projects. I will note that our major life cycle project that we have is $20 million a year for mill and overlay projects. That's not accounted for in our operations and maintenance budget that we'll show. So here's just a breakdown by percentages.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Back on the local street sales tax on the budget overview on the presentation we had a couple presentations ago, it mentioned taking some monies from the local street sales tax to fund public safety, police on our streets for safety. I forgot what the figure was. What percent or how much is that? Or, what is the breakdown on that?
So the breakdown that we've seen is that will be $1.8 million for that's right. Okay, annual. So
for PD.
Yes. Well, yes. It'll just fund positions that exist today. It'll be coming from the transportation safety for street safety.
So is that how much of the fund is that? Is that the entire fund?
Oh no. We collect how much a year on that?
And what do you use the local street sales tax for?
the local street sales tax, we use that for, on the next slide, it's essentially 47% of our operational budget. We use that for
everything.
Asphalt maintenance, signal maintenance, salaries, everything that's related to our operational budget. But the local street sales tax is used for more than that, and I think that's why we're looking at funding, the traffic section of police with it. We fund a couple positions in engineering with it that are dedicated to street maintenance.
Do you fund a person in PD today on safety?
We have a staff member that's half in PD and half in transportation that we fund, that is with crash safety, and they're the ones that do all the statistics and produce our report, and then they work with PD on those high crash areas and where they should be patrolling.
And we use it for engineering to create safe streets. I think that's the number one thing we can do is how we design our streets, what we want to achieve in the design instead of leaning into public safety. We can look at design things.
It's a multi-pronged, your approach there, design, enforcement, all those things.
So we use these funds for more than just our operational budget. I think that's what we're here to specifically talk about transportation's operational budget.
And then the photo enforcement fund is in question for this year. I guess we don't know.
No, it was,
No, that's.
it's still intact.
Well, one
So
bill
far.
died.
The
Oh,
one-
wait, it did.
It did
talking
die.
about the
The bill-
legislature.
the legislative act, the bill died.
Okay.
How are we doing, Miranda? We're going to hang on to it? This is your path right here. How did Miranda's protect photo
I think
radar?
the bill died. Why?
It's all on you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Yes, for the last 15 years, we've been fighting measures to maintain our local authority to provide this program. This year, there were two measures. Both came out of the state Senate, an SCR and a traditional Senate bill. The SCR is effectively dead at this time. I say at this time because we're still in session and it could be resurrected, but the SCR is effectively dead and the SB is still moving through the process.
And we use these funds, I think, for education and outreach.
No, specifically, this is what's important, right? Because people complain about, photo radar, you're just trying to increase your revenues for whatever. It directly goes towards, just give us a variety of the type of projects it goes to.
Yeah, so if we're upgrading a traffic signal so it's a protected only left, so we're making it safer, essentially, we do that. We've spent the past 5 years specifically focused around schools, whether that's an enhanced crossing or we put in some raised crosswalks in Las Sendas. This past summer, we used the red light or the photo safety enforcement for that. So they're capital projects. We try to actually keep them in-house and do it with in-house crews if we can, if it's a small enough project, because that reduces the cost. We can get them out quicker. Sometimes they're big enough projects. If we're installing a pedestrian hybrid beacon or a new signal for a mid-block pedestrian crossing, those will then send over to engineering and make those a capital project. But all of the photo enforcement fund is their actual projects. It's been a huge blessing over the last 5 years. We've presented at multiple conferences, and there are many cities that are jealous of what we're doing. It's great. We will hold on to those funds for as long as we can.
Ms. Goforth.
So the transportation fund, how's that funded? Where's the money come from?
So the transportation fund is, it's funded, it's essentially the reimbursements we receive through the ALCP program or the regional program and federal grants. We have to pay for the project up front, and then with regional projects, we get 70% of what we spend back, up to whatever the agreed upon amount is. Once those reimbursements come in, they go into the transportation fund. We fund a lot of our CIP projects then, or our arterial reconstruct projects, or bike and ped projects. With the transportation fund dollars, they don't have any strings attached.
I was going to say, they're not restricted in.
They're not
Counselor, you
restricted
can
in any
see
way.
in our Mesa Moves initiative, it
I remember.
includes that element of it in there too. So it's committed to those kind of projects.
So some of the safety actions that have come out of safety that's come out of the Safe Streets for All, or whether it's come out of the new master transportation plan, are those capital projects? So what you mentioned, the crosswalk, the raised crosswalk, crosswalks, are those considered capital projects?
I will say yes and no. I think if we're able to do it in-house and don't have to make it a capital project, we'll do that. The Las Sendas raised
What does that mean?
crosswalks.
Sorry, what does that mean?
Sorry, that's without having to go necessarily through a formal design, through engineering and bidding out to a contractor. We have a lot of in-house crews. We have contract services through transportation. It's a small enough project. We can do that in-house with our own crews and our own contracts.
It becomes
Under your
almost
own
like
existing budget.
It still becomes
Yes.
a capital project, but he's using his staff that's paid through operations
Yeah.
to go do it. So they go do some smaller capital projects, but when you sometimes say capital to the staff, they think, oh, I'm going out and getting a contractor, I'm
Yeah.
taking on a big project. But the result is it ends up with infrastructure, light.
They're all infrastructure projects. It just depends on the complexity. So the Las Sendas raised crosswalks, that actually did go over to engineering because we were affecting drainage and we wanted to make sure we were tying in, we weren't going to negatively impact utilities and things like that.
And I understand some of those come up unexpectedly during the year, but I guess, are we going to get an overview during the capital improvement project presentations of what projects you're going to start, complete during the next fiscal year? I know you and I've talked about this. I would love to see something that like planning does, which is a work plan, to see what is it you're going to start and complete. I understand you have a lot of operations. We don't need the whole litany of things you do. Sure. But I don't have a good sense. And the reason I ask is because we pretty consistently have constituents that say, the transportation projects are behind. We have bonded in 2018. We haven't seen anything either start or complete. So that is something, and I don't know if that's for a discussion here or not. I mean, we're talking a little bit about CIP that I would like to see, and I think other members of the council would like to see. What is it that we're committing to start and complete in the next year?
And so when you say that to us,
Yeah.
that sounds like mostly those driven by bonds, and those large
Probably.
capital projects. So we can
Yeah.
have that conversation
Okay.
soon, but maybe not in the context of operations. Now, what happens is, you see, Eric's kind of doing everything kind of below that approved, authorized capital project that went for a vote. He may be picking up on the smaller landscaping, the crosswalks, that's what's doing on, and that sometimes, I think there's a plan, but a lot of time is he gives the flexibility to work with council members.
It just comes
on
up.
specific issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But imagine you have a list
Sure,
of
we can come up with
larger,
a dollar, yeah.
and that ties back into, we talked a lot about the action plan from the master transportation plan. What is it that we're going to focus on?
Sure,
And it would just be nice
That
to
makes
see
sense.
that so we can,
Sure, and so I think we've updated the CIP with our latest schedules as we've been working with engineering on those projects. And I think, I do want to highlight, streets aren't just streets, they're utility corridors. And so I think a lot of times that's where a lot of the timing comes from, is making sure all the utilities get taken care of first. We don't want to go in and put down a new street and then 2 years later have a utility that needs to come through. So, but yes, we have updated that will all be in the capital improvement program.
Eric, I just want to add, hearing council operation revenue sources and then the different funding sources in there, maybe you can have a breakdown of what they fund. And so in the future, just itemize them, bullet points, so that, and probably, Candace is probably going to say it's already there. You need to look on page such and such, but just so we can go on with the presentation, but.
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, that's why we wanted to present, right, all of the different funds, because you heard about the general fund this morning, you heard about the enterprise fund this morning, and Transportation Department does not use either one of those funds, right? And so we want to make sure you have understanding of what they have, and if you look at the graph that's up here now, or the pie chart, the local street sales tax was not here when I started with the city, right? It was a new one that came in. They used to have general fund funding that offset our HERF, highway user revenue funds. And then the residents have approved local street sales tax to be dedicated to transportation. That took the place of the general fund when it came to their budget. When we look at the HERF and the local street sales tax, they're really interchangeable for the most part. There's very few things that can only be used in one and not the other. They're both for transportation-related items. So their personnel could be in either one. Their street operations could be in either one. Their signals, their street lights, everything they do on a daily basis, it's really, there's not a big differentiation between what those two funds can be used for. They forecast the revenues for both of those. And I know Eric was going to get to this, but on the local street sales tax, it is a sales tax. It was impacted by the residential rental. So there was a decrease in that revenue stream, and that's included in their forecast. So when they look at it, they forecast the highway user revenue fund, what's going to come from the state. And we do have some changes that are going to be happening in that over the next few years as new cities reach a higher population and start taking a little bit of our pie away. They also looked at the local street sales tax, the impact on the residential rental, what did it do to their stream over these next few years. Those are their two main, if you look at the pie, that's what funds everything they do on a daily basis. And then we have some of these other ones that are very restricted, environmental compliance, it's for the basins, storm drain and so forth. And then the photo enforcement, as we saw, is for safety, specifically safety projects. But when we look at those two funds, they're really, when we talk about their operations, they're interchangeable.
Thank you. All right. Next pie, please. Pie chart.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This pie chart shows our proposed operating budget for fiscal year 25-26. The total amount is $57.6 million. And as you can see, unlike other departments in the city that have a larger proportion of their budget going to personal services, our personal service budget is only about 34% of our overall expenditures. Another third of our operating expenditures are allocated to our contractual services. These are the contracts that we have for minor maintenance and things that come throughout the year that Eric was talking about earlier. A couple of examples of those contracts are our pavement preservation services, our concrete installation and repair services, as well as our traffic signal maintenance. The gray section of the pie chart, those are our commodity costs, so those are our materials. So when we have to buy slurry and oil and things like that, that's falls in that 7.4 million. And then we have utility costs, our water and our electric. This does cover the utility costs for the streetlights that we have. And then the remaining 13% is other services, and a big driver of that is our fleet maintenance costs. So that's how our operating budget is broken down. And this next slide,
So you said pavement preservation. So the largest amount of pavement preservation is done on a contractual basis? It's not done in-house? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I think probably 15 to 20 years ago, we were in the process of going to more contracts and less in-house work. I think with the price increases that we've seen over the past 5 years, we recently stood up a concrete crew because we think we can do it more efficiently. We are looking at that because our contract expenses have gone up more than everything else in the past 5 years. So we're constantly reviewing what we can do in-house more efficiently. I think the hard thing is a lot of our work is seasonal. So especially with paving, we're paving essentially starting now in March through November. What do we do with an in-house crew for December through February? So we have to balance all of that out, and Orlando and my staffs are looking at that.
Mr. Reddy.
On the sources of revenue, where do fees go if, contractors pay out fees if they close lanes of streets, right? Does that come to the transportation department or depends on projects, or I'm sure we collect those fees, but not sure where they land, right? So I didn't see that here.
Councilmember Heredia, Mayor, that's a good question. The temporary traffic control permit fees do come back to the transportation department. Do we?
There's a lot of streets closed down
Yes.
all over the city, so I'm sure we collect
You want to be
fees on it,
Yes.
so. But I know there's city closures as well, right? But there's a lot of contract work that happens in our city, so.
So Mayor and Councilmember Heredia, when we're talking about temporary traffic control, that is housed within the Department of Transportation, and it's their staff that are overseeing those contracts and collecting those fees. Any fees that are collected by the Department of Transportation run through the local street sales tax fund. So it's the local street sales tax fund. The majority of that is the sales tax coming in, but there are small revenue items that come into that. So that's what we use that fund as their base fund. If you think of that, if they were a general fund department, fees would come into the general fund but be associated with the department. It's the same situation for transportation, just that we're using the local street sales tax as their base fund. Any revenues that come in related to the actions that they provide would come in through that fund, but they would have separate revenue code, so we could track those.
Is that substantial, or what's the amount?
Well, yeah, and Kansas quickly, it is, but also a lot of what you're seeing too is in the right-of-way, and those permits are being issued by development services, engineer development services, because what we're using them to do is to offset all these new inspectors and people we have to have out there watching this. So we're not netting up so much as we're trying to get ahead and get our staff out there so that are monitoring and trying to make sure things don't get hit or whatever, or if they do, that we're there. But that's hard.
Yeah.
You can tell, we're having a hard time chasing behind these folks. But the idea is they're supposed to be paying for that additional cost of the city.
For instance, like fiber, right? So.
Yeah, that's
Fiber.
that's exactly it,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
We're trying to use those fees to offset our cost, to review the plans, and then have inspectors out there to monitor all this.
So, Councilmember, to that point, our permit revenue has doubled since 2022 for temporary traffic control, but we've also grown our staff from 4 staff members to 10 staff members to try to keep up. Because, you know, the fiber is a major driver. There's a lot of utility and development still happening, and our own city projects. We've kind of got a triple whammy going on right now. So we do monitor that, and yes, thank you for the question.
And Mayor and Council, and just on that note, anytime we're talking about, these are really fees for service, right? So a permit fee or traffic control fee, those types of things, we are looking at those on a continual basis for cost recovery. And that's what Eric's talking about. So while we might say our revenues are maybe double, our expenses are right there with it, right? And so we're just trying to keep up, make sure that we can cover and can provide the service. And so you'll see revenues go up. That's why you have to look at both sides at all times, the revenues and the expenses at the same time.
Very good. Thank you.
This next slide shows the $57.6 million expenditure budget broken out between our 2 operations. You can see the difference between our field operations and then our traffic engineering.
So as part of the budget process, I know you've heard a lot about the 2% reduction. Because we have dedicated funding sources, we weren't asked to look at a 2% reduction, but we are looking at reallocating some of our funds to be able to give back funding sources that other departments can use. So we're looking at converting the storm drain maintenance program that we have, which is $2.1 million. It traditionally and historically has been spent or funded through the environmental compliance fee. We're now converting that over to the highway user revenue fund.
Yeah, so Mayor, thank you, Eric, for doing this, because what this means is, and I know it's bureaucratic, but if you think about the environmental compliance fee, that's a fee that's charged, what is it, where are we at, $7 on every utility fee, or every utility bill, sorry. And that is to go pay for mandates, state, federal mandates that are unfunded, that there's some law or compliance for us to meet. Stormwater laws are the best example. So we have to maintain basins, we have to do a lot of stormwater. What we're doing is we're taking some of that work or that effort, and we're now funding it out of the HERF funds, which are being collected by transportation. What that helps is it grows. We had topped out of the capacity of that fund, especially when you talk to parks, who else uses that? Parks is probably the biggest user, because you imagine all those big they're parks, but along the freeway, they're stormwater basins, right? And the maintenance to upkeep that has been a huge pressure on the Parks and Recreation Department's budget. So the general fund's having to absorb, continuing to maintain that. So what we're doing is transportation is moving, make sure I'm saying this right, Candace. You say it for me. Because what we're going to pay for this out of the transportation fund, HERF specifically, because it relates to storm drain, relates to streets. And then that way, those expenses that were previously in the environmental, being funded by the environmental compliance fee, those departments now can push more of their general fund activity into that compliance fee. So it has the reciprocal effect of helping the general fund by shifting some of that expense, eligible expense, into the transportation fund, and specifically the HERF dollars, which are collected statewide off of gasoline usage. Okay, now help me. Was that close?
Yes. And so when we talk about the environmental compliance fee, it was one that was put on the books to address unfunded mandates when it comes to environmental regulations. And so that's why storm drains are in there, but the biggest area in there are parks and recreation with, again, the basin maintenance. And as the basin maintenance, the cost of that, as we know, has gone up significantly. The costs that were in this fund were outpacing the fund. And so when we look at everybody who's in there, who could be funded in another way that would not be detrimental to the services or the overall city, that's where we looked at transportation and said, well, transportation has the available revenues. If it was parks and recreation, it would be going into the general fund. The general fund is having difficulties right now. And so it's the transportation expenses, which are eligible for either HERF or local street sales tax. Again, it's for either one. They just designated it to a particular fund for that.
Do we handle that in-house, or do for instance, the storm
that,
basin cleaning,
yes.
all of that is handled by?
Absolutely. It's just what Candace was saying, that fee that's coming in to cover that cost wasn't enough.
Yeah.
With the rising costs, just like Eric said, same thing applies to parks. And so what's happening is they were tapping out all of the funds that they could out of the environmental fee, but then we're seeing more of those impacts in the general fund. And so we're looking for ways to move the cost out of the general fund into these other fees. And this transportation fund, HERF fund, however you want to say it, is doing much better than the general fund. And it seems to be, managing our stormwater is very important and critical to our street system. So that's why we made the change.
So question on that. I'm sorry if I'm phasing out. It's been a long morning.
No, I get it.
But
You got one more to go.
the environmental impact fee or whatever it's called. Compliance fee. So that doesn't go into our enterprise or utility
It just
funds?
sits in its own, we
It does not. It's in
specifically
its own-
said in its own
Only
fund.
allocated directly into the
Yeah,
general
because
fund?
we set it up as specifically to pay for unfunded environmental
Okay.
Right, so, yeah,
compliance.
Mayor and Councilmember Duff, so it was set up specifically so that we could track it on its own. It's in its own fund. So the revenues that come through that, while it is on the utility bill and it is a per
not-
account,
it doesn't-
it's a
yeah.
per account.
It doesn't go to the
fee.
utilities.
Right, it doesn't go into the utilities, it goes into this account specifically for these items.
So, clearly when we tap into a new bucket, in this case, our funds, to pay for storm drain maintenance, which is important, I will give you that, it takes away from something else. So what do we sacrifice? What have we decided is of a lesser priority?
So the good news, we didn't have to make that choice this time, other than the choice was that we have a pretty healthy reserve in the transportation fund. So we felt comfortable that the $80, $90 million reserve in the transportation fund could absorb this on an annual basis.
Okay, and then as our fiscal picture improves over time, then we can shift this back if we so choose.
Yeah, I would suggest it's related to streets, and storm drain maintenance is critical, because typically when storm drain's not being maintained, it's flooding streets, right? And so we kind of said, yeah, this actually makes sense in the long term, because a lot of street projects, not only are they, Eric is a man of many hats. He only provides a way for utilities to get down the way, but also the water to get down the way. So the streets are the main path of stormwater, and so we're trying to manage that at the same time. But in the future, council can adjust that, but I think it actually makes sense because most of those basins are constructed when those streets are being developed. When we are building streets, we're always considering where's the stormwater go? Where's the basin going to go? So it's all part of the street infrastructure.
And so, and this activity in and of itself is to maintain our storm drains. Those are essentially the pipes that are underneath the streets that convey the water then to these larger basins.
No, I'm good with that, and I have a picture of Elliott Road back in the day when it used to flood all across. I'm gonna throw that out in the Thursday throwback.
I appreciate it. Besides, I don't think there's any other roads that we could tear up.
I have a question. So, Chris, you said we had a healthy reserve in our transfer.
We have a healthy reserve.
We have. So you mean in our literally in the transportation fund?
No, so I think we're using. So the fund we were looking, or when Chris was saying transportation fund, he's talking about the local street sales tax and HERF funds, not the transportation fund we use for
transportation fund, the reimbursement fund. No, it's not
that's my question.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I guess, is there somewhere we can find, I'd like to know how much we collect. I mean, you've given us your budget.
You're going to see it here in a few slides.
Oh, we are?
Actually, we don't have it.
No, I don't think I've seen it.
We didn't put it in.
We'll give it to you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
That'd be
we'll put a
great.
schedule that shows it. I'm sorry.
I think because it's been ever changing so far with some of these changes. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we can provide that to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah, sorry about that.
There's only one more
It's a
slide.
schedule, looks like the one in the general fund. It has similar.
Just send it to all when you do.
Yeah,
We will do that. Thank you. As part of our proposed budget, we do have 3 adjustment requests that we're putting in. The first is for an additional striping truck for our in-house crews. We've experienced, I think, the same thing that Sherry talked about earlier, a lot of downtime with our existing striping truck, and we just need one for spare. This one will also be a little bit smaller that we'll be able to get into additional locations that we have to contract out now. We also have a new van for our bicycle and pedestrian group. They do a lot of outreach, both through education and through events. They have a trailer right now that they have to borrow a vehicle for, and that the trailer is actually leaking water. So we've decided that they need a van for that. It'll be easier for them. And then we're adding a senior planner. And this senior planner will focus on what we've heard over the past couple of years between development and the transportation network. We've had initial discussions with development services. We don't know whether this position will be in development services or in transportation, but the main focus will be transportation and development and the urban connection. And with that, we'll take any more questions.
Council, any more?
Just on that point, I know we're trying to do a little bit more interdepartmental communication on all this stuff. So is that the person with transportation that would be doing that? Or not necessarily? This is just something.
Yeah, I don't know this connection. I think the departments are pretty, there's a lead, but this is providing another resource of expertise that maybe we don't have today to provide a specific area of planning related to transportation within the context of when we're working through development in the planning. And so we're hoping to bring to a different level of background and expertise that maybe we don't have today, that we have generalists trying to achieve, but this would provide a specific discipline or background in transportation design.
Yeah, I think it would be an additional service. We would keep the plan review and things like that with the staff that we have currently.
So if they are under departmental services, is that what you called it?
Well, yeah, you're right.
Development, I was like, that didn't come out right. Developmental services, it would still be paid for by HERF is what you're saying.
It'd be paid for by yes.
Okay.
And we would have communication, and it would, my vision is when we are working on any sort of planning efforts, that staff member would be involved just as much as our staff members too.
Okay.
You work on every planning right? I mean, every plan, every submittal comes through transportation, right? So you mean every time that a plan comes through?
For design review, correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. And that, the current person, Robert Apodaca, is just essentially a liaison, right? That is not a.
He's the lead, right? He's the one that makes sure all that information is pulled together from the different departments.
Okay.
His role is to be that singular point of contact. Because when developers say, oh, I'm confused about departments are going to be, no, talk to Robert. Robert is, and I've empowered him to be the guy. If he sees conflicts between departments and what direction they're getting, Robert makes the call. So he's the point, he's the lead. It's clear that Robert makes the decisions, whether it comes from fire or engineering or whatever. He takes in consideration all of that and pulls that together. He's in Nana's department, but he has the broader, he's kind of like the overseer of all the pieces to make sure all the reviews are being done, and if there's conflicts, he's trying to resolve them. He's trying to work with the developers to come up with solutions on what they can do and try to be consistent.
Okay, and how's this person going to do? That sounds like a lot.
Well, because that's
Not
everything,
necessary.
right? That's because he just makes sure and that's everything, right? That's not just transportation, that's all the other components.
Okay.
This person does what specifically in the
Yes.
design phase?
So I think and Nana, you can jump in, but Robert is really, he's the engineer behind it all to make sure that the water works and transportation has everything that meets the code and such.
Okay.
I think this new position, I think is really what we've been hearing is there needs to be a better interface between development and the transportation network on the planning side before it gets to Robert and we have engineering plans, that this person would help with that, would help the city develop, some of these guidelines. We've worked on a TOD plan, our transit-oriented development plan. I think with the transportation master plan, we've talked about different cross-sections for roadways in different land use areas that this person would be involved with that. So it's more on the planning side and less on the infrastructure and the ground side.
We had a lot of conversations in the transportation plan and in the general plan and matching the street for the development, so it is a complementary to the development and not an opposing force to what you want to accomplish. And I think a planner can get in deeper. It's more than an engineer. I mean, I wouldn't say more. It's different than an engineer who makes sure it works. Then a planner is making sure it's achieving the goals of the development or the area or those connections. We've had a lot of conversations about that.
Absolutely.
Supposed to bring the
For sure.
design
Yeah.
into the form, right? Because right now, staff kind of takes what the developers gets us, we just try to make sure it
Yeah.
fits. And hopefully, this is a planner who comes in and says, okay, wait a minute, let's look at connection, let's look at capacity and how we make this integrate together.
And I think that's fantastic. I think it's necessary. We need it. And I don't want to get real detailed, but I guess all I would caution is that I would hope this person has the authority to make that work, right? So that when a department says, and that drives the development, right? As opposed to a department driving the development and the way it's going to look. But this planner drives all components of that development.
Yeah, I think.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so,
well,
'cause
but I
what
would
good are
say
you if you don't
nobody-
really
we
have
don't
any
do
of
it-
the-
We don't work that way, right? It's a total participation. Everybody comes together to come with the best plan. We don't have one personality that gets to come in there and say, unless it's Nana, to say, this is the way it's going to be. Because we want to get the benefit from all of the perspectives to make sure it works.
Absolutely, but I would
But I don't
argue, I
think-
would push back a little bit that we do allow departments to stop projects. So that's what, and push up
And if
against.
they
So-
do, then it elevates up and we find out why. If they're not abiding by federal ADA requirements, everybody recognizes that.
Of course,
But
but
if
I
we're
guess that's what I'm
talking
saying.
about-
Let's not have to elevate up. That's time, delay. That's what I'm saying. This
Right.
person hopefully is the elevate up.
That's
is
fine.
the-
Well, no, this person needs to be on the ground at the beginning, providing input, so the developer doesn't get frustrated that they don't get this input until further down the process. They need to be frankly, at the very beginning of the process when they come in. They're just showing us blocks of
For
development.
sure. But I mean, as far as like authority, I mean, as far as being able to sign off, I guess authority is a heavy-handed word here, but that's.
Let's stay on the budget
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
I mean,
I'm getting a
I
little off
appreciate all
topic.
that, but let's focus on that. And
Can he just respond?
I don't think so. No, go ahead. You gotta have a little humor.
Well, so we've been talking, this is a great opportunity for us to really bring the planner right from the conceptual state. And also, one of the things that we're going to be using this position for is to be proactive rather than being reactionary, because by the time plans come to us, like Chris always says, they've already formed the idea of what they're going to do. By getting the planner, which is going to focus on transportation, looking at the vision of the city, looking at plans to really get ahead before plans come to us. And this will tie in, especially as we are also out right now trying to recruit for an urban designer. So this transportation planner, the urban designer, and Long Green will all be able to help us and be ahead of the game before project comes in. When the project comes in, sometimes we need somebody to be very much involved and look at it from the transportation perspective instead of just reviewing and checking boxes. This person will be able to do that and look at multimodal, how those plans connect to other future plans and all that. This is what the position will be able to do.
Thank you. Any more slides?
That's it?
That's it.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you. Keep our roads rolling. One thing I do want to add, council, we just approved trucks and trailers, asphalt equipment for paving in our areas to be more responsive, and a concrete truck and crews to stand up, because we're trying to reduce our costs and be more proactive in our neighborhoods. And you can do some of the smaller projects more efficiently, scheduling our own and not having to rely on the contractors to do it. So tell your crews, thank you.
I appreciate it.
We got a new pothole to share with you, too.
Okay. Item 2C is presentation to provide direction on code compliance department budget. So I just want to, Councilmember Heredia may have a stop around 11-ish. You're good now? Yeah. Anybody else? Nope. Here till noon? All right. Angelica, thank you. Bringing your team with you.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. I was actually the first one that was very surprised that they were not here.
Ooh, somebody's in trouble.
She's got Andrew back there.
They're taking care of,
They're working.
yes, of residents back at the office. So they're using their time very wisely. So again, good morning. The mission of the Code Compliance Department is to preserve, strengthen, and maintain the integrity of our community and neighborhoods by means of education, voluntary compliance, and community engagement. With that, we have a couple of priorities and objectives that we do focus on. The first one is to ensure code compliance. The second is community engagement, and then, of course, employee engagement. Along with that, with ensuring code compliance, there's a couple of things that we also focus on. Priority is to increase voluntary compliance. We work with the residents to educate them and outreach with them in order to gain that voluntary compliance. In addition to that, is to increase proactive code compliance. So as we receive complaints, they'll go out, assess that complaint, investigate it, and if they see any others in that street, they will also address those, and that's what we mean with the proactive code compliance. And then also constantly working to help reduce that complaint response time. And then as far as our objective for community engagement, what we're doing is partnering with different departments within the city, but then also with community partners to do team up to clean up events. And then we've also engaged in the last year on social media education. And then in addition to that, providing community education mailers, postcards, and newsletters just to help inform and educate our residents on our codes. And then with the employee engagement side, we have been working in the last year on implementing a new training program to ensure consistency with our staff. That training program has been updated, and then also working with our employees just to help engage them. I have a couple of pictures here of a case that our staff took care of in the last year. So we received a complaint on weeds. You can see the before and the after picture here. And this next slide, I have a couple of pictures of one of the Team Up to Clean Up projects that our staff engaged in just this last fall. Our code officers usually perform anywhere from 10 to 13 Team Up to Clean Up projects. We have the code officers each select an area or a property within each of their assigned areas, and we work with the community to, in this specific case, we partnered with the Police Academy recruits, and anybody that will partner with us to go out and take some action. Here at this specific home, it's in the Evergreen Historic District. Elderly lady who wasn't able to maintain her home. It was a very large parcel. There was a lot of dead vegetation just with the hot summers we've experienced the last year or so. A lot of the, well, not a lot, majority of the vegetation on the property died. And there are a lot of homes that still have low chain link fences that are able to look into the yards of this specific home that we were receiving complaints on, had concerns about fire hazards. So we partnered with solid waste, with transportation, with the Police Academy recruits, and went in and filled up multiple dumpsters and hauled away many tons of trash at this property. So we were able to make a big difference here.
And that's who that was, the Police Academy recruit?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Spilsbury.
So when you have a violation and you give a citation, is there an easy way for a homeowner to ask for help with that and get the neighborhood involved?
So the starting process, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, the starting process is usually we receive a we receive a complaint. Our code officer will go out and verify that there is a violation on the property, and then we will leave a notice at the door of the property. We will also mail a notice to the responsible party. Sometimes it's the owner, sometimes it's the tenant. It just depends on what is going on at the property. In that notice, we provide the contact information for our staff so that they can reach out directly to our code officer. We encourage that. We want to work with the community a lot of times. They're just not very well informed as to what's allowed, what's not allowed when it comes to items like utility trailers and boats and maintenance of their homes. And so we strive first to provide education. And if they're in a tough situation, they're sick, they have a family member that's out of town, we'll work with them to provide an extension. We're not looking to issue citations off the beginning. We're looking to work with them, provide extensions if they need them, in order for them to come into voluntary compliance.
And why don't you jump to slide 7, because that's really telling you, those two slides are really important.
Yeah, but I guess I'm specifically asking, as far as whether it's a city resources that help them or a neighborhood that helps them, like the neighbors come together to go help clean up the yard. That's an easy piece for them to convey to you that they need help and to get them the help.
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, it's happening with both.
Okay.
Sometimes it's our staff going out and helping, organizing these events, and sometimes it's working with the community. So it's a combination of both.
And how big is your staff?
So we have a total of full-time employees right now.
Of what?
20 full-time
20
employees,
full-time
yes.
employees. Okay.
So in this slide here, we have just charted over the last several years the percentage of voluntary compliance that we're achieving. For this year so far, we're at 81%, but it'll vary throughout the year. Some months we have higher levels, some months over, but you can see we're averaging well over 80% just over the last couple of years. The next slide here has one of our metrics. With the response time to code complaints. So usually our code officers are averaging about 3 days. So that's from when we receive the complaint to when they're out there performing the first inspection. And then within this slide, we're providing data and information on the actual turnaround time. So from when that code officer sends that notice to when we're closing out a case because we have received voluntary compliance. It's usually happening within 10 days.
What's the target on that slide?
The target is 16 days.
Okay.
So we've been averaging slightly under that. Here we have a financial summary over the last couple of years. You can see that our budget has actually trended upward, and that's because over the last year we have added a couple of positions within the department. We are also working on several service enhancements, which I have started to implement within the department. We're not necessarily waiting till July 1st to implement, but one of those enhancements is having our staff provide the majority of our process service. So we're expecting to have our budget savings with bringing that service in-house as opposed to using a professional services contract for those services. We're also expecting that that will help provide improved customer service to our residents by having direct contact with our code officers in that. In addition to that, we are working on an integration between two of the computer systems that we're currently using to have them automatically integrate, eliminating manual entry from any of the staff. And then lastly, training for our staff members just to ensure that they're handling the cases in a consistent manner. But then we're also able to have all of our code officers perform every type of inspection to be able to provide more improved service throughout the community. That, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Are you ready?
I am.
Of course you are.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Spilsbury.
On slide 7, thank you, by the way, for the presentation. Does voluntary compliance mean that they comply without actually, tell me what that means.
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, it means we did not issue a citation. It
Okay.
means that we did issue a notice to inform them of their violation, and they voluntarily took care of the issue. So it did not go on to citation, fines, any of those.
So then anything in orange means that they were cited.
That is correct.
And so what percentage of those eventually take care of their issue?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, we've been averaging anywhere, you can see on here, so basically it's, 21, it was 13%, 22, it was 18%. This year, it's about 19%, but of course, we're only at the 2nd of April here.
But, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So it's the remaining of those cases are the ones that actually ended up having a citation issued. The residents are able to request a civil hearing in order to discuss specifically their case with their hearing officer. It does mean that they had a citation issued, but the hearing officer can determine the level of their fees. At times, if they have already abated their violation, then the hearing officer will not issue any fines, or he issues reduced fines.
I guess what I'm asking is in the orange section, are those people all eventually compliant? Do they all get cited? I know of some that maybe just live out of state and will get arrested if they come into Arizona, right? So there's no completion of that compliance there.
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, you are correct. There are some people where we do issue them repeat citations. Once we issue a third citation within a 36-month period, we do classify those residents or property owners as repeat offenders, and we are proceeding with criminal charges in those cases if the violations continue on the property. So we work with our prosecutor's office and city court on that.
Okay. I'm trying to find out if citations work and what percentage works and how long does it take? I mean, just more details on that, on the orange part, I guess.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, unfortunately, there are some cases throughout the city where we have issued multiple citations, we've issued criminal charges, and there are property owners that just refuse to comply.
Okay. And then, so you said you have staff of 20. How many of those are actual officers that are going out?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, we currently have 13.
13, and they all cover an area, is that correct?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, currently as it stands right now, 12 of them are have an assigned area. We have a 13th position that handles the overall city with commercial and signage. Part of the training that we're implementing in the next couple of months is to have all code officers perform every type of inspection. The code officer that handles the entire city is the only one that has been focusing on commercial and signage. And we're looking to change that so that all code officers are handling all inspections throughout the city, as
Okay,
opposed to
and
just one staff member.
What days and hours is code compliance available? Is that a Monday to Thursday?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, our code officers are actually staffing from Monday through Friday. So we have half of our staff that works Monday through Thursday and the other half that works Tuesday through Friday. We also have 2 code supervisors, and one is also Monday through Thursday, the other Tuesday through Friday.
Do they have duplicative areas or do they cover for each other depending on when they're working?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, no. The only duplicative area that we have covered right now is with the one code officer that handles commercial and signage. But if we have staff members that are on vacation, then we will have the other code officers cover for them. But on a regular basis, when everybody is working and here and not out of the office for an extended period of time, the code officer handles their assigned area.
So with the assumption that if our target is 3 days to respond and we're, under that for the most part, is that the indication that we have enough code compliant officers for our city?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, right now, that is how we're reading that metric. That is correct.
Okay, and you touched on this, but the proactive part of this is that they're not driving around looking for problems, but when they go to a complaint, they look up and down the street to see if there's anything else that catches their eye or that they need to address.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, that is correct. We call that the 360 view. So when they pull up to a specific address, they'll address the violations at that property, but usually we'll take a look around and address any others. Typically, when a resident does call us after they've received a notice of violation, that is typically the first thing that they are commenting on. But my neighbor so-and-so and my neighbor so-and-so has this issue. And so we're able to look with the address and we inform them. We've already also given them letters with their notices of violation.
I know code compliance can be kind of a sticky situation, whether people think we should be doing more and some people think we should be doing less, and there's a lot of disagreement on that. I know just a conference I attended and talking about this topic, our numbers seem low for our population compared to some other cities, but I guess if the metrics that they can respond within 3 days, maybe that's, I don't know what other metrics we need to be going off of, but you feel like we have enough to cover our city for what we're doing.
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, that is correct. Our code officers will carry a range of anywhere from 200 to 300 cases per month each.
Wow.
And so based on the number of complaints coming in and the number of complaints that they are generating, it seems as though we have sufficient staffing. Now, I will agree that if you look around at the commercial properties and signage, having one employee cover 143 square miles is not sufficient, which is why we're implementing changes.
Okay.
We're providing training to the remainder of the code officers so that they can all address those complaints as well and have better coverage throughout the city.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so I didn't know if I heard that right. So we have one person for all of commercial.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, that is correct.
You would probably say that's why.
As a primary job duty, it doesn't mean that the other code officers do not handle commercial and signs. It's just the bulk of that code officer's work is just commercial and signs. The bulk of the other code officers currently is nuisance code, zoning code on residential properties. But like I said, that is something that I have noticed is something that needs to change within the department, and we're working to provide training of the staff to make those changes.
Yeah, I know. I think we can all agree, we've talked about it before, that a lot of our commercial spaces are pretty run down and probably have several code violations. And so I don't know. I don't have enough experience in this, but do you emphasize your resident code violations over and let your business code violations kind of go? I don't know.
Well, it's complaint-based, frankly, right? I mean, that's where if we get a complaint on a old strip center or whatever, we'll respond. But I'm assuming, Angelica, we do, but I'm assuming the majority of this is residential-based complaints.
Yeah.
And the individual who does the citywide came from a city council initiative to ask us to really go out and enforce the temporary signage, commercial signage that was taking place around the city. And so that's why we were able to fund that position, I don't know, 10 years ago, many years ago, I don't know how long it's been, but a long time, where we had that person specifically focused on signage, right?
I want to say it's been about 5 years, 5 to 7 years.
Long? Okay, never mind. So anyway.
So what do you think about how you tackle some of these underperforming areas with code compliance?
So
I don't know.
It's a council philosophy, right?
Yeah.
We have not We don't go out patrolling the streets looking for it.
I'm talking commercial. I would
Okay,
agree,
so even
residential,
commercial,
but I'm talking commercial.
Regardless, right? That's not been the philosophy. It's been
I think we need to
complaint-based.
rethink that
Well,
because we're
that's-
trying to emphasize redevelopment and,
So Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, if I can add, I have been having conversations with Jeff McVeigh and Jeff Robbins on how, as they're working in different redevelopment areas, we can partner together so that we can also provide enhanced services with code compliance in those areas. So.
because a lot of these commercial center owners don't even live in the state. They're companies from out of state. I don't know why we're trying to protect them.
I think
Mike?
what you're hearing from council, when you cross-train your inspectors, then they could go out and issue a citation on a commercial property. If that happens, there's some underperforming assets we have in our community. And of course, we have to be careful, but still move forward with that.
But Mayor, I would challenge us, I mean, we should make that a little bit more, what is our goal? How are we gonna, again, I go back, but how are we gonna measure success on that instead of, let's emphasize commercial? I mean, I think if we're in agreement, I think we ought to, have some sort of action plan for that and end game in mind, if that's the direction we're shifting, that would be my suggestion, as opposed to just
Well, this is where
giving
we
you a
can discuss
general,
it and give direction, because that's what we're doing today, is give direction.
The city we were in, excuse me, wow. Of course, when I try to talk now, what's happening?
I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
While she does, I have a question.
I'm ready.
While she's choking, I have a question. On 2024, is that the total number of code complaints you received, so 5,935?
Mayor Freeman, no, that is not the total number. This is just the number that resulted in an actual violation.
Okay,
We
so what I
received-
don't see is the number of code complaints that have come into your department.
Mayor, you are correct.
And so we'd like to see that in the future.
We will get that to you.
Because that kind of conveys into service, it's like public safety response, police or fire. When you reach your maximum capacity, you're not very responsive. If you have 200 to 300 cases per month, that seems like a lot for your inspectors to get out and do their jobs. And that's why we're kind of talking, okay, do we want more inspectors out in the field to reduce, the workload so you can be more effective? And of course, you've got the data that says you're getting out there timely and do it, but 200 to 300 cases per inspector, to me, seems like a heavy load.
So, Mayor, we have actually looked at data throughout the country, and that number does seem to be a pretty good benchmark that has been established throughout the code enforcement community for a caseload for a code officer.
So I think I can talk now. The city we were in, wow, here it comes. Okay, the city we were in last summer is a population of about 80,000 people, and they have 10 code compliance officers for 80,000 people, right? So if you did the math on that, we would be incredibly under, which is fine. And I'm not even suggesting that we go to that. They also have 4 rental enforcers that are checking every single rental property. And anyways, they have a whole program that they do. But my district in particular has a ton of shopping centers that are old or vacant and have a lot of issues. So I'm constantly dealing with this. And Main Street especially, Broadway, Power, right? So there's 2 properties on Power Road that after months and months and months, code compliance was able to at least board it up, fence it off, right? But it's the broken window theory. Like, we know it attracts shenanigans, right? So I would absolutely support an increase in more proactive code compliance on our commercial. Whatever that looks like, I would support that because it is an issue. And when we're, with the different things we're trying to achieve on Main Street, I have multiple developers coming in and wanting to develop on Main Street. And with our current Off the Streets program and future Off the Streets program location, I'm really, really wanting to make sure we keep up on that area.
And that doesn't necessarily, we're not necessarily saying you need additional resources. We're saying maybe we shift resources to emphasize.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, which is exactly what we're looking to implement at this time.
Do we,
Well,
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we still
go
do
back
the
to that.
beautification projects where we're taking sections, whether a neighborhood or commercial, and working with everybody and saying, hey, we're here, we're doing a beautification, you look good, or you need to change that and everything, and you're going neighbor? Do we still do those kind of projects? Yes.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, yes, we call those the Team Up to Clean Up projects. So the code
Okay.
officers will identify an area. It could be a single site, or it can be a neighborhood that has anywhere from 200 to 300 homes, that we will have all of the code officers go out, and we work with our solid waste office, and code officers will go walk the streets home by home, identifying for each single home any violations that they have. The homeowners are sent postcards beforehand, so they know that the code officers are going to be coming out. And then we also provide them information as to when the dumpsters are coming, so that they can throw away any junk or debris or landscape materials that they need to.
Okay, so it's not, yeah, it's just not one-off projects, it's a total comprehensive thing.
Yes.
I know a lot of code compliance as far as commercially can fall under the redevelopment areas, because we realize there's a multitude of issues going on, and some of it is code. And then the intent is to work with a property owner and talk to him about that and cleaning it up, and also talk to him about options to enhance, or maybe they want to sell their property or whatever, and going one by one and addressing it more holistically rather than, citation. We were trying to do an economic development project along Broadway, and one of the first measures was getting everybody in code compliance with their signs and everything like that, and it's in a low-income area. It was a huge hardship on some of these little tiny businesses. So we worked with them and got some grant stuff, and they would put in some money, and together then we're able to elevate those businesses, and hopefully they're doing better and stuff like that. But we have to be sensitive also to what's going on in that area, and if a heavy hand is going to push them out of business. We had problems where they're leasing a space, the citation goes to the owner says, you have a citation, it's against your lease, you're out. And then they have to, they've been there for 20 years, 30 years, and now they have to leave because the landlord says, no citations, it's, So we have to be very sensitive about where we are, what the context is, who the owner is, and I think that's how economic development, or the RDA areas and code compliance can work together as a team and be more holistic instead of just a heavy hand, to understand what the issues are at that property. And maybe it is citations, but sometimes it's just understanding what is needed in order for that property to be productive. So.
Mayor,
That's my input.
Councilmember Duff, so just to respond to that, so we do not start typically with citations, we do issue notices. A lot of our residents and small business owners do see the notice and believe it's a citation or it's a fine. And so when they do contact us, we do explain, no, you have a 2-week notice here that we're going to come back and re-inspect. If by that date you've resolved the violation, we're closing the case. Now, oftentimes, there is something going on, they need an extension, and we've empowered the code officers to provide those extensions and work with the business owners, the residents, to provide those extensions. We typically do issue 2 notices. The 3rd notice is the citation, and so we don't typically go to citation immediately unless it's a property that already has a history of that specific code violation, where we have previously talked to the property owner or the tenant and tried to educate them on the violations and methods to abate them, and they just choose to continue
And I must say
violating.
that during that time, it was before you were the code compliance director, and we learned a lot through that process and how to be these micro businesses, and how we learned a lot about that, and time has evolved. But I just wanted to kind of give some context to the total scope of the code compliance, and like in the redevelopment areas, the code compliance is a part of their objective in working with that property owner to make it more, and getting it into compliance, and how we can, assist them to ultimately, we want it to be a productive business. We don't want to have anybody collapse or, shut the door or whatever to be unproductive and worsen the situation. Yes.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, some of the conversations that I've had with Jeff Robbins as we've been discussing how we're going to work together is the very first item is that we're not just going to do a 2-week reinspection. We've talked about doing a 30-day notice. So it is something that we are looking specifically at how to best work with those small business owners to ensure that we're trying to work with them.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I appreciate that cooperation and making, thank you.
I appreciate that, Jen. Your comment, I think that absolutely is true. Just a quick question. Do you find in the commercial spaces that it's the tenant or the property owner that is responsible for the issues,
Mayor,
resolving the issues?
Councilmember Goforth, it depends on the violation. When it comes to displays of excessive signage, it's typically the tenant.
Okay. Well, so moving forward, it sounds like, and this is great that you've already identified it and you're working with Jeff Robbins, but can you come back and sort of say, here's going to be the plan moving forward on how we tackle these underperforming, these commercial spots that are, that are really kind of bringing the city down. Here's how it's going to be different. Here's what you're going to do differently, and maybe shift resources and your team. I don't know. That's what I'm at. If we could have you come back with the plan to address the commercial spaces.
Mayor?
Well, and that's fine. I think what we do have a committee too. I don't know what committee she would come back to explain the plan, but I think Mr. Brady has some direction here. I mean, we're talking about the budget and, budget direction. And I think we're hearing some consensus about commercial and industrial space and bringing them up to par. But I don't know how to do that exactly, but we can work that out. But I think you have a plan too, how to do this and come back to council. Mr. Heredia.
Yeah, just real quick to piggyback on that. I would even include, any text amendments to, especially the egregious folks, right? Like if we need to change something in our text, so to add those pieces or at least explore those pieces.
Mayor,
in those things.
Councilmember Heredia, I have had conversations with Mary and the planning director about some of the specific codes, the way that they're written, the way that we're not able to use them as much as a tool. I am working with my staff to develop a list that Mary will have, that as they're working on text amendments, they can look at modifying them just so that we have better tools to work with in code compliance.
Yeah, I think we brought that up in the strategic planning too. If there's need text or code updates to help you out to be more efficient. Okay, with that, Mr. Smith, did we get off a topic too bad? Okay, good. All right, hearing nothing else, thank you, Angelica. All right, moving on. Item 3 is acknowledgement receipt of minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Ms. Billsbury, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, next is current events and conferences attended, council members. Ms. Duff?
Did we do 2D?
2D.
Appointments of various
We did
boards,
not.
and I'll
Thank
make a
you.
motion to approve.
I'll take a motion, action to appointments to various boards and committees. Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Goforth, Mr. Heredia, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for that catch. Now we're to current events and summary. Ms. Duff, do you would like to start?
Thank you. I'll try to be real quick. There's a lot. I'm just going to cover some things over this last week. Last Thursday, I attended the Mesa Art Center, the Arts and Service, veterans doing art. There was an exhibit. This is an annual thing, annual event. It was fabulous and does good work and working with our veterans. That same night, also attended the Creative Innovation Venture Challenge celebration at the studios hosted by the ASU Edison Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute, looking at seeding small business ideas. And then from there, I went to the Dining for Dreams, which is a local first program. It's their restaurant boot camp. Some of these graduates might be in our incubator, and when we get that done, it's a fundraiser for that item. And It was wonderful. Friday, I attended the Economic Development, held a Women's Appreciation, Business Appreciation event at the Mesa Arts Center. We had a wonderful reception, and we saw Cher afterwards, which was so good to celebrate Women's History Month. Saturday, I attended the Cesar Chavez Community Baby Shower hosted by the Family Resource Center at Eagles Community Center. Even Mayor Freeman was at the baby shower. It was beautiful. It was a fabulous job by all departments involved and well utilized by the neighboring expectant mothers in the neighborhood who need the resources. That evening, I attended the Arizona Public Schools Gala and raising funds for that foundation. On Sunday, I attended the 16th annual 1 in 10 gala for the LGBTQ plus youth programs and camps. And Monday, I went to the Capitol and attended the swearing in for the newly appointed LD9 Senator Kiana Sears and Councilmember Spilsbury. We went together, so I wanted to congratulate her, and that represents the majority of Mesa, West Mesa to about Val Vista roughly. So she will be our replacing Eva Birch. And I'll let someone else cover the memorial. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, do you have anything? I'm going to go from right to left. Put you on the spot.
No, just as a reminder, next year is the 250th anniversary of America, and we are starting, just this week, we just started meeting to plan various events and, more importantly, just brand some of the events that we are currently in to celebrate that milestone. So stay tuned for more information.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Ms. Spilsbury.
I have a long list too, but hopefully I was paying attention so I don't duplicate anything she just said. But I wanted to mention that we had our Mayor's Youth Committee presentations last week, and congrats to the group that won for a presentation on a Mesa mentorship program. But man, those kids are impressive. That was fun. On Wednesday last week, I got to attend our community court and watch some of those cases go through and cried, and it was beautiful. And I love what they're doing over there for our community. And then was able to go and tour Cul-de-sac in Tempe and wanted to thank them for that tour. The Mesa Arts Center, or their program Arts and Service, which is for the veterans, they had their exhibition last Thursday, and that's always just a beautiful thing to see. Lots of us were there for that. Friday was the Azura Gala with the formerly Mesa United Way, and I also attended the 1 in 10 brunch. On Monday, I got to go speak at Mountain View for their club called For the Girls, kind of culmination of Women's History Month, and that was a neat experience. And Tuesday and Wednesday, we had two great programs. One was the Mesa PD First Quarter Promotion Award Ceremony. I think we watched 8 different videos of life-saving measures that have happened in our city, which was really cool to watch those videos and see what's happening. And then we had our beautiful Mesa Police Department Fallen Officer Memorial yesterday, and that was beautiful as well. So,
great. Ms. Goforth?
I think you covered most of mine, except for I did attend with Mayor Freeman a town hall, town hall at Las Sendas community, which was great. He did a great job. He had about 25 questions that he went through to answer, so it was a lot. You gave a lot of great information, so anyway.
Thank you.
And plus we went to the Monarch celebration. I don't think we've mentioned that since
we haven't.
Yeah, at Red Mountain Library, which was fantastic.
Great.
Butterflies.
Well, I'll just sum it up. Thursday, we had a ribbon cutting for the new Chamber of Commerce right here across the street. Arts and Service, I attended that. I attended a meal packing event at Desert Ridge High School. There were about 400 volunteers about putting oatmeal packets together. They did 50,000. They were trying to do 70,000. I don't know what they ended up with. But that's something that I told the Vice Mayor about, and they want to do that annually. We did have the Asian Festival. All of you attended the Asian Festival. Councilmember Heredia and I spoke along with the chairman, Mr. Galvin. House of Refuge Gala, the vice mayor and I, he was my +1. It's nice to have him with me. Sunday evening, I attended a Living Water concert. That was by Resurrection Ministries, and Miss Spilsbury was there. And that was quite the thing about hydration, how important it is in our community. Then yesterday, Vice Mayor and I took a tour of In Touch Call Center at Southern and Country Club. So it's they have several hundred employees there. With that, we've all been pretty busy. Mr. Brady, can you share future meeting events, please?
Yes, we will see the mayor and council here on Monday, April 7th for the study session and council meeting. I think that is being, before that, preceding that is an audit and finance committee meeting at 3:30. So we'll see you on Monday.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Monday's starting early too as well, right? Just so the public is aware.
Oh, did I not say that? Okay, yeah, it's not on my thing. 4:45? 4:45 on Monday.
4:45, okay, thank you. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ms. Spilsbury, Ms. Goforth, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're adjourned.